You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties.
Join us.
Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era, improv, news stories, and break our necks trying to suck our own because we're obviously smitten with ourselves, and we know that everyone loves it when we ingeniously improve our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we were raised by rentals. Mike, for our 86th episode and the final installment of Season 3, it's time to get nerdy about the best thing to grace pop culture since Star Wars. Ourselves, of course.
We're just already starting with the patent. I like this. Let's patent that back.
Oh, yeah. We're doing more than patent, baby.
Stroke.
Oh, man. Anyway, thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Raised by Rentals Season 3 finale. And we're here to talk about, as I mentioned, that most interesting of topics, which is the show itself. So
Indeed.
we're going to go through, our year-end review, which is now the third year in a row we've done this one. We did it at the end of our Ash Saves Christmas episode, which actually started Season 2 as a look back on Season 1. Then we ended Season 2 with our year-in rear view episode where, we kind of go through some facts and figures and talk about the episodes. So if you're interested in listening to some of that and hearing us talk about which episodes we liked the best, which ones we thought worked the best or the worst ones, definitely stick around. But we're going to front load this episode with a fulfillment of the teaser that I put into our last episode, Tales from the Cryptmas, which is that we have a little bit of a game, an audience participation game. So we're not going to bury the lead. We're just going to jump right into it. And that is, we want you guys to vote on an episode that we're going to do in Season 4. I'm going to put up a poll on, Facebook, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, put your vote down in the comments, whatever it is on Instagram, other social media, however you're able to leave your feedback, please go ahead and do so. And what your feedback, what your vote is going to be is Mike and I went through our list of episode topic possibilities. Ever since we started, way back even before we recorded the first episode, we've been maintaining a list of potential, topics for episodes, improv ideas, and in some cases, rental rants that we want to eventually get around to doing. There's one in particular that I really think we need to get to in Season 4. Mike, I think you know which one I'm talking about, the one we kept putting off and putting off.
Oh, indeed.
But we keep coming up with new ideas as we've been going along for our improv episodes. People give us great ideas. Ideas come up in, the course of just chit-chatting or even recording episodes of other podcasts like The Boogeyman's Closet, where, we got an episode idea out of your recent episode covering Thanksgiving.
Such a bad movie.
But part of the problem is, as we add new ideas to the list or we come up with new things that we're excited about, we push concepts that we like more or concepts that are fresher. Those get pushed to the front of the list, or, we have to come up with something for a holiday like Halloween or Christmas that we want to sync up with the calendar. And so what we've ended up with is quite a long list of ideas that we haven't gotten around to yet. And some of them have been on that list for 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
So what we did was we put together a sub list of the top 10 dead episode ideas. That's ideas that at this point we're probably never going to do. Even though some of them are pretty good just on the face of it, or some of them seem like maybe there's something there. But after so much time, we've never either had an idea for it or we've never been so stoked on it that we put it on the list. There's one on here that we did actually have on the schedule once, and it kept getting pushed so many times that we just aborted it. But we're going to go through this top 10 list and put it out for you guys on social media to let us know which one you think we should actually do in Season 4, and whichever one you pick, we'll put it on the calendar.
Sounds awesome.
So, I will say, as a disclaimer, we reserve the right to change our minds, right?
Exactly.
Which is to say, if there's an episode on this list that we later decide to revisit, or we get some inspiration striking, and suddenly we have the hook that'll make an episode work, we reserve the right to just go ahead and do an episode on it anyway. But we're going to peel back the curtain a little bit and let you all in on some of these topics that, as of right now, at the end of season 3, like I said, they're probably never going to happen.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to mention, as per many of our recent episodes, because this year fucking hates me, I once again have a cold. So you will hear a lot of snorking, a lot of coughing. I will be muting often to blow my nose. This is, I think, like the 5th episode this year where I've had to give that disclaimer. I don't know what happened other than I was around a lot of people, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and on very, very little sleep. And of course, the 27th rolls around and I wake up feeling like dog shit. And now I'm still feeling like crap just in time to go back to work. So I'm not looking forward to working tonight because I feel like hell.
Right. Especially since you work on the phone.
Yep. It's going to be fun.
Speaking of snorks, they're kind of like the underwater Smurfs. Right?
Nice segue. I see what you did there.
And the first idea on the list that I'm going to mention is we do a reimagining of the Smurfs as a live action movie that they would have made in the 80s, which means it's going to be this sort of unintentionally creepy fantasy movie like Legend or The Dark Crystal or Return to Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you know what I'm talking about. These movies where they were supposed to be these like whimsical fantasy movies, but all of the characters they designed were just fucking creepy.
Oh, God, yeah. Hell, I remember in Dark Crystal, freaking Agra gave me nightmares. Like, I was so scared of fucking Agra. Like, even though she was a good guy, but the fucking taking her eyeball out and, like, looking at people, I did not like that. And then the scene where the fucking Skeksis drain, I forget what they're called, but, like, the weird little mole people that they were, like, draining the life force out of. The first time I saw that scene where the one dude gets drained completely, I fucking cried. I was like 6 or 7. It scared the shit out of me.
Absolutely. Legend to this day still creeps the fuck out. I think Legend is a fucking horror movie.
Oh, it is. Fucking Meg Mucklebones. She is one of the most terrifying things ever captured on film. Like, just when she pops up out of the water and she's like telling, freaking Tom Cruise what she's going to do to him. He's like, "You plan to eat me?" She's like, "Oh, indeed I do." I was like, oh, God. No.
Right. And then I think of like Labyrinth, which is kind of like, a whimsical movie with a happy ending, and it's a musical, but it has those creepy fire creatures that like take their heads off and throw them around. And what's her face? Jennifer Connelly falls down that pit, like just full of like gray hands that grab onto her and talk.
And the oubliette.
Yes, the oubliette.
And then there's and I know he's a good guy, but let's just say Hoggle right off the bat. Hoggle is terrifying looking. Like, he looks like a little person version of Keith Richards, and it's not okay.
He does. And like, who knows? Maybe our version, would make Gargamel some kind of like sexy rock star character to like sexually awaken all the children of the 80s,
Oh my God. Yeah, Gargamel will have the Bowie bulge.
Yes. Oh man.
Oh
so
my God.
I think we're like talking ourselves into it. But anyway, so no,
I know, right?
That's a dead idea. That's on the cutting room floor at the moment. But that's one. That's number one. Number two is one that we've actually talked about doing, again, like kind of seriously for a long time, but it just never seems to make the cut. And so, we're putting it on the list here, which is that we do a TV show spin-off of The Lost Boys, starring the Frog Brothers, but again in the 80s or maybe the early 90s, where they did a lot of like TV show spin-offs of popular movies like Weird Science and Ferris Bueller. So yeah, it would just be, what are their names, like Edgar and Allan Frog, right? Like Edgar Allan Poe. I think that's what their names.
Oh God. Let me see. Yes, Edgar and Allan. You are correct.
Okay, good. So yeah, I think
I felt the nerd cred slipping away from me.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that would be again, a fun idea, but I don't know what that would be about. I don't know what the Frog Brothers would be doing. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know what the format of that would be. So that's another idea, right? Lost Boys TV show about the Frog Brothers. This third one is kind of interesting, but man, it would be a lot of homework to figure out because I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 movies written down here that we'd have to watch at least part of
Oh, Jesus Christ.
in order for us to do a tribute to Al Leong, right? Which, if you don't know who that is, he's, you probably know him because he plays Genghis Khan in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That's probably his most well-known role, but yeah, I have all these movies written down because he pretty much ends up playing some kind of goon, like a villain's henchman in like every 80s and 90s action movie. I mean, I won't list them all off, but like he's in Big Trouble in Little China. He plays a different goon in Lethal Weapon 1 and 4. he's in
Die Hard.
Yeah, the guy who like steals the candy bar while he's waiting.
Yep.
He's in They Live. He's in Action Jackson, which I think is highly underrated.
Fuck yeah, the movie was great.
He's in Showdown in Little Tokyo, Last Action Hero, which I think is actually where we initially got this idea. We saw him in Last Action Hero, which itself is a very, meta movie about action stars. It's an action movie about action movies, and of course it has to have like, the goon of all goons in it. So of course he's there, but yeah, hell, he's even in Hot Shots Part 2. So that's number 3. And in the same vein is our fourth pick, which is a movie where we explain how Reginald VelJohnson is a multiversal cop. Which, which makes sense when you realize that actor, who you might think of as Carl Winslow, the dad on Family Matters, or Sergeant Al Powell in Die Hard. We probably all watched that in the last month because it is a Christmas movie.
Exactly.
But he plays a cop in lots of things. He's a cop in Ghostbusters, in Turner and Hooch. He comes back in Die Hard 2, and I never even heard of this movie, but apparently he plays a detective in a movie called Plain Clothes that came out in 1988. And then in addition to being a cop, he's been an EMT, he's been a fireman, and then, stretching the concept of like a uniformed worker, he's also been a chauffeur because he plays one in Crocodile Dundee.
Oh my God, dude, I forgot he was even in that.
Yeah, so, but I mean, right off the bat, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 movies where he plays a cop. Like,
well, and not to mention the entirety of Family Matters. Like, he's a cop. Like, dude is known for being a cop.
That's a fun idea, but again, I don't know what the story is, so we'll see. The fifth idea is that we do a crossover with the characters from The Explorers and Flight of the Navigator. And I threw The Last Starfighter in there as like a maybe. I don't know, like just cool like sci-fi movies from the 80s where like young people suddenly just got to travel in spaceships.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen either The Explorers or Flight of the Navigator in so fucking long, but I loved those movies as a kid.
Yeah, I love both of them. I think I've seen Flight of the Navigator more times for sure, but The Explorers had like a pretty interesting cast because now, of course, I have to like look it up.
Was that River Phoenix?
Yeah, River Phoenix is in it, and
Ethan Hawke, River Phoenix. Who else was in there?
And that dude, Jason Preston. That's what I was trying to think of. Jason Preston, right? He basically quit acting, I think, sometime in the 90s. But I mean, he was in like Gremlins 2. He was in Saturday the 14th Strikes Back. He was in a bunch of stuff, at that time. He was on episodes of like the Twilight Zone, and I always really liked him. But yeah, he hasn't done much in a long time. Oh, and he's in Lady in White. Don't forget, he's the older brother in Lady in White.
I was just gonna say, I started coughing. I was like, shit, didn't we watch him in Lady in White?
Yeah, on the Bugman's Closet. That was one of my Patreon picks. I don't remember if it was a birthday one or not. But anyway, yeah, so that's a fun movie. Flight of the Navigator is a fun movie. It's got P.B. Herman, Paul Rubens as the voice of the Navigator. Computer, I forget the name of that character. That they did give this ship a name. And I love The Last Starfighter. That's one of my favorite sci-fi movies from the 80s. I think
Oh
it's,
yeah.
it's sadly underrated.
Which I never understood why it didn't get that much love. Because at the time that it came out, like those types of sci-fi movies were so popular, and like everyone I knew loved it, but it was just kind of a flash in the pan, like there and then it was gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's been something weird with the movie rights going on for a while. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like it hasn't really been brought back for any kind of revivals like a lot of 80s and 90s properties have been. Now that, the kids of that age like us are all grown up and have like money and, we want to like buy our childhoods back again. So they put out like
Yep.
legacy sequels and, new DVD box sets. But there's something going on with Last Starfighter where we just haven't seen it return.
Well, I know famously there was a toy line that was supposed to come out for The Last Starfighter, and it got canceled because the movie didn't do great like they were hoping. But they were like these little 2-packs of figures. So they were about 3-inch figures. So they were a little bit smaller than G.I. Joe, but they were little 5-point of articulation. Like you'd get an alien and like a pilot. And just like it was really cool. Like it looked like a really cool set. And as a kid, I would have loved that. But yeah, they canceled them.
Yeah, it's a bummer. But yeah, I think Lance Guest should have had a bigger career. Not that he's not still around in acting, because he is, but I feel like he should have had a bigger career. He was the star of The Last Starfighter. He was the main character in Jaws: The Revenge. I know everyone hates that movie except for me, because it's the greatest fucking Jaws movie of all time. Except for the first one, fine. We'll give it to Spielberg.
One of my coworkers would highly agree with you on that, because she's always yelling at me because I said that I hate that movie. She's like, it's so good. I'm like, no, it's not. It really is.
It is so good. You're right. Speaking of the Boogeyman's Closet again, you have an episode, in your back catalog where I came on and I told the whole world how amazing it is and how everybody who hates Jaws: The Revenge is an idiot.
Oh God.
Moving on. Number 6 on this list is Children of the Corn, but we do a remake where it's a screwball 90s comedy.
Oh God. Could be called like Corny Kids or something like that.
Oh God, yeah, it would be corny for sure. It would have to star like Jonathan Taylor Thomas or somebody.
Oh God. Oh Lord. I'm trying to think of like who the husband and wife duo would be. I don't know. I'm immediately picturing Jennifer Aniston as like the wife.
Oh yeah. Who would be? I mean, would it just be somebody else from from Friends? I don't know.
I could picture the dude that was like her love interest in Office Space. I could picture him.
Oh yeah.
I always forget his name.
Oh shit, his name is Ron Livingston.
I know, right?
Yeah, Ron Livingston. That's what it is. It was on the tip of my tongue where I was like, his name is Rob. Wait, is it Ron or Rob? And I had to like look it up. Because he's in Swingers, which is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So
oh yeah, great movie.
I absolutely love that movie. John Favreau and Vince Vaughn. It's genius.
Side note on John Favreau. Like, so I was watching a lot of Christmas movies, as many of us were, over the last couple of weeks. My God, the physical transformation that guy went through for roles. Like, because he's always been kind of a heavier dude. Like, he's always been kind of not heavy, but like thicker. Like, just he's never been like a cut guy. But watching him in Elf, and it's like he looks like John Favreau. He plays the doctor, and it's like, and then you see him in 4 Christmases. I don't know if you've seen that, but dude is fucking cut. Like,
yeah, dude.
It's like, and that was like a year later. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, dude, I love 4 Christmases. That's one of those Christmas movies that I saw it when it first came out and I dismissed it, and I've watched it recently the past couple of years because Christina likes it, and it's in our rotation now.
Yeah, no, dude, I never wanted to watch it. I was just like, whatever. Vince Vaughn, Reese Witherspoon, like it's one of those types of family friendly Christmas comedies. I don't really care. Well, one of my friends at work was like, oh no, it's fun. Like, and they also recommended Christmas with the Cranks for me. And I ended up liking that, even though it's a dumb, silly movie. It's got a lot of good actors. I mean, it's got Emmett Walsh in it. It's got Dan Aykroyd, oh my God, Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, it's a really good cast, and it's completely out there and ridiculous, but it's a feel good Christmas movie. And I've been watching it every year since she recommended it to me like 4 years ago. But they also recommended 4 Christmases, and I was like, let's see what this is. Dude, I laughed my ass off the first time I watched it. I'm like, this is a solid Christmas movie. I really like it. So
Yeah.
not that that's what this podcast is about, but I just had to make that comment.
Hey, we gave lots of recommendations on this podcast, but yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think I came late to Four Christmases. I came late to the Santa Claus. Hell, I even came late to Jingle All the Way. But those are all movies. I don't necessarily watch them every year because they're not at the top of my rotation list. But
Same.
I definitely like Four Christmases. I like that one and like Love Actually. Those are the two that Christina and I will watch. And like the kids, whatever, if they're there, fine, whatever. But they're a little bit more on the adult side, especially Love Actually, which has way more nudity in it than you probably remember.
yeah, that's one I haven't watched for a long time, but I did really like it when I watched it. So I know it's a good flick.
Yeah, we watch it every year, Christy and I. We've finished wrapping all the presents and putting them under the tree, and then we're just gonna sit in the living room in the dark with the Christmas lights on, and drink eggnog and whiskey, and pass out on the couch watching a movie. And Love Actually is the movie.
I like that tradition.
Yeah. But speaking of Jon Favreau, the one thing I always think of him when you think of his body transformation is, so back in the late 90s, he was in Swingers, he was in Deep Impact, he was in Very Bad Things, and he had about the same build, which is that, thick, not fat, muscular, but like, he wasn't cut. But then 1999, he was in a Showtime movie about Rocky Marciano. It's just called Rocky Marciano, and he plays Rocky, the boxer, the real life boxer. And oh my God, look at a picture of that dude, and he is fucking ripped. He has like no body fat. It was crazy impressive how he got in shape for that movie.
I'm gonna take a look here. Holy shit! Yeah. It's always impressive to me when actors can do this, because just, speaking as a fat guy, how hard it is sometimes to lose weight. It's like seeing a guy like this that can just transform. Same thing with what's his name? Oh my God, guy who plays American Psycho and Batman.
Christian Bale.
Thank you. I kept wanting to say Patrick Bateman. I'm like, no, that's American Psycho. But yeah, Christian Bale's another one of those fuckers that has like transformed his body. Like, I mean, we all saw The Machinist and then saw what he looked like in Batman. It's like, what the fuck? Like, that's crazy. It's so, it's amazing to me. Like, I'm not mocking it. It like truly is amazing to me that people can do that.
Yeah, especially since, if I remember correctly without looking it up, he went from The Machinist directly into Batman Returns. So he went from being like super underweight, like in an unhealthy skeletal way, to being fucking built like a linebacker. Like they told him he put on too much muscle for Batman, and he had to like slim it back down again.
Right. It's like, that's insane.
So moving along, number 8 on the list is another one that we have talked seriously about doing, but we always had reservations about it. And so again, now we're just putting it on the Dead Ideas list, which is another TV show spinoff from an 80s movie, this time where Howard the Duck becomes a family TV sitcom.
Yeah. This is one where it's like, I feel like we could do it, but I also feel like it's not high on the list for a reason.
Yeah, I just don't know what the hook is, other than like, yeah, it would be funny, because I think of things like Alf, right? Like, what if Alf was Howard the Duck instead? Like, that's funny on the face of it, but I don't know what the hook is for that, other than just, okay, fine, it's a fish out of water alien story, but there would be more to it, because Howard the Duck is way more adult and raunchy, and R-rated than something like Alf would be. But if you were to take that character and put him in that family-friendly sitcom space, I mean, I can understand where there would be comedy there, but I can't nail it.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of right there with you on that. Like, I know we could do it. Do it, but yeah. It would be one of those ones I'd be worried about crashing and burning on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The last two are both cartoons from, I think they're both from the 80s. Like, I have a terrible temporal memory, which is going to be the segue into the next segment that we get to here in a second. I have a terrible memory for like when things happened. I know it's like, yeah, I think it was the 80s. I remember being a kid. I don't know.
Right.
But I always have to look things up, even in my own life, to understand exactly like how events fit together and like what came first. Because I remember events, but I have a hard time placing them in like a sequential order. order and understanding the time frame in my brain. But the next one, number 9, is the television cartoon Pirates of Darkwater. The Pirates of Darkwater, which was canceled before it could finish its overarching multi-episode storyline. So you never got the finality of what was the Dark Water, what happened to it, like how does the story wrap up. Kids of the time never got to see it, but what if we were to finish the story?
Well, and famously, that along with the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon of the 80s, those are two adventure cartoons that really screwed kids over because people wanted to know how they ended, and it was just like, womp womp, no ending for you. Now I know with Dungeons and Dragons, they at least put out in the box set, they have the I know it was the script, and I want to say the actors like voiced their characters, so there's like an audio file or something where you can kind of listen to the last episode and read along with the script. So at least there's that, but Pirates of Darkwater never got that.
No, it never got that. And there was a toy line, there was a comic book, a Marvel comic book, even if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure there was like a Sega game. I don't remember exactly, but again, I don't believe, and I don't hold me to this because I'm not an expert, but I don't believe that any of those like spin-off media ever resolved the story either. So there was still no ultimate ending.
Right.
But it was intended to be a finite story. It was never meant to just be, an open-ended, like long-running weekly serial. Like it had a beginning, middle, and ending planned, and we just never got to see it. So, this is actually one of the first ideas we ever came up with for Raisable Rentals. It's within the first 3 or 4 that we ever wrote down, because we always thought, I would love to see the end of that story. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with the cartoon. I never read the comics or did the game or anything. I just was really, really into the cartoon, so much that it influenced the stories that I wrote for myself for years. Like all of my fantasy stories were like, pirate themed in some way for a really long time. But, I eventually fell off because I was like, well, what's the point? I don't know how this thing wraps up, but I think we could do it.
See, now, I never played the SNES game of it. I played the Genesis game. I played the hell out of the Genesis game. I never owned it, but it was one of those ones that I often rented. And I remember, I'm like actually looking at it right now, I vividly remember this magazine advertisement where it was Bloth's face up close with like eye boogers. And it was like, and it says, look your enemy straight in his eye. And it's got like pictures of the game, from both Sega and Super Nintendo. But I want to say that this was one of those things that's happened a lot in the 90s where a franchise would get 2 different games on different systems. They'd be similar, but they would be different enough where it's like, oh, if you have both Sega and Super Nintendo, you're going to want to buy both. So it's like they did that with Ninja Turtles, with Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo, and then the Sega Genesis got the Hyperstone Heist, which is essentially the same exact game, just reskinned. And they did the same thing with Disney's Aladdin, Lion King, and I want to say Pirates of Darkwater was one of those too. But anyway, sorry, a little ramble.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Alas, we've actually been rambling on a lot more about these ideas than I thought. I was originally planning on just rattling them off and like we'd move on, but it's I don't think that you and I can help but add some commentary and kind of at least take a stab at an idea.
Right.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's just the way our brains work. But last but not least on the list is one that was on our schedule. We were planning on recording it. We had put it out far enough in the future in season 1 so that we could do some homework. We took it off the schedule because we got busy. We put it back on the schedule in season 2, never did the homework, kind of lost interest in it, and then eventually just aborted the whole thing. But you even mentioned it on an episode of Count Creepyhead's Saturday Morning Monster Mash that, it was coming up, but we never did do our gritty live action adaptation of the cartoon Cops and Crooks.
Yep. I remember we discussed that one quite a bit, like early on. That was something that, and I don't know why, because I don't think either one of us are particularly big Cops and Crooks fans. Like I loved the toy line as a kid, but I didn't love it enough to be like all over it when it was out. I got it when it was on clearance. Like, I think I got one figure when they were brand new, Dr. Bad Vibes. And then all the rest of the figures I got were when freaking Gold Circle and Hills were clearancing them out.
Yeah. I was never a huge toy collector. I played with toys. I had a lot of toys. I was really into action figures and Lego. Those were my like top two. GI Joe is like my all-time like favorite toy franchise. But you know me, like I'm not a toy collector. As I grew older, I lost interest and I didn't keep up with the characters. But I remember that Cops, as it was actually originally known as just Cops, an acronym, COPS, but they added the and Crooks, I think, to avoid confusion with the reality TV show Cops in syndication. But I don't remember what store it was exactly, Child World maybe, but the last toy line that I ever purchased for myself before I gave up childish things to become a man was I bought most of the line. I bought every one that they had at that store. I think it was Child World. I bought every figure they had with my paper route money, and I really loved them. I thought the characters were great, and I definitely played with them. But that was the last time that I had a toy line where I was really into playing with it before I kind of moved on to other hobbies like comics and girls.
Right. See, now Cops and Crook, the character designs were great. They were ridiculous, but there were some great character designs. Like I remember the one that I fucking loved was one of the villains named Cuckoo. He was like the weird punk dude with like the time bombs, and he had like the shotgun and all.
Loved him.
I loved that figure. And then Barricade for the good guys, I absolutely loved. He was the guy in like the bomb suit. It was all blue, and he had the yellow gas mask. And then of course, Dr. Bad Vibes was my all-time favorite. He was fucking mad scientist with an exposed brain. How could you not love him?
Right? My favorite one was Buttons McBoom Boom, who
he was so cool.
He's a classic like 40s style gangster in a pinstripe suit who would open up the front panel of his suit, and he had fucking machine guns that would like flip out of his chest.
Yes.
It was so cool.
Oh man, I'm looking at these guys now. There are some characters, I don't know the names, I'm just looking at a picture of them, but there's one that looks like a reject from Miami Vice. He's a bad guy. He's got like white pants and like a blue popped collar jacket and like a yellow tank top with a buzz cut. Like he looks like he belongs on Miami Vice. It's bad.
Oh, yeah, I can't recall who that is. My two favorites were Buttons McBoom Boom and Hyena. Hyena was sort of like Joker style character.
It looks like his name was Berserko. I never had that guy.
Yeah, I had him. I had most of the Crooks in the figures. I didn't have all of the Cops. I had Long Arm. I think Long Arm was my favorite of the Cops. Bulletproof was like the leader of the group. I think I had Sundown, but I'd have to look up the rest of them.
Yeah, no, that was a fun toy line. It really was.
Yeah. I definitely think that was an example where the toys were a lot better than the cartoon. The cartoon was fun for sure, and I definitely used to watch it even in reruns and in syndication. But like I said, the toys were so good that, again, as a person myself who never really collected toys, I just stole GI Joes from Kmart. But I spent my paper route money trying to complete the line. I do not recall what happened to those toys because I have a bad memory, so I don't know where they went. I just know that I got interested in other things and moved on, but I definitely don't regret, and I didn't regret at the time spending my money on those characters. And that's part of the reason why we ended up putting that on our list again way back into season 1 in the very, very early days. We were like, it would be fun to do a sort of RoboCop or Blade Runner style, like near future sci-fi story where you have these cyborg cops versus super crooks.
I kind of liked that.
Yeah.
I still feel like there's some legs there.
Yeah. Well, like I said at the beginning of this list, the disclaimer is that we reserve the right to change our minds at any time and just decide to do one of these anyway. But Again, we're going to put them up for vote on the social medias. So if you listen to this and you're interested in any of the ideas we just went through, definitely go, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever, leave us a comment or vote in the poll. And you guys can pick one of them that we will then, for sure, no matter what, we'll put it on the schedule for season 4.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, I'll go through the list one more time just for the recording, and then we'll move on to our next segment where I want to visit another topic that we've brought up a couple of times but never really got into. But the list to vote on is The Smurfs as a dark 80s style fantasy, Lost Boys spin-off TV show about the Frog Brothers. Number 3 is the Al Leong tribute. Number 4 is the Reginald VelJohnson as a multiversal cop. Then the Explorers and Flight of the Navigator crossover. 6 would be the Children of the Corn as a screwball 90s comedy. Howard the Duck as a family TV sitcom, kind of like Alf. We finished The Pirates of Dark Water. We do a Cops and Crooks live action adaptation. And I realized as I'm reading this that we skipped one, which is what was originally number 7 on the list, which is Weekend at Bernie's.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But Bernie is a zombie. So again, that one could be fun, but I feel like the idea is right there in front of you. Like, of course, that would be a fun thing if, in much the same vein as my Look Alive original like video game concept from last season, where we have a zombie who has to appear to be alive, but instead of Bernie himself doing it, because Bernie's a brain-eating zombie hungry for flesh, his 2 lackeys from the company who came out to his beach house for the weekend for whatever reason, they have to pretend that he's like totally normal and alive, and he's not trying to eat your brains.
That could definitely be fun.
Yeah. So there it is. There's the 10. You guys vote. Let us know which one we're going to do. Maybe we'll end up doing one of the other ones now that we've talked about it and kind of refreshed the list a little bit. But we'll see how it goes. Mike, I didn't prep you on this one, and since, as I already mentioned, I have a terrible temporal memory, you have a much better one. I thought it would be interesting, since we have a whole episode devoted to talking about ourselves, that we finally tell the story of how you and I started our writing team.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the origin story of the Mike and Josh improv comedy duo?
Well, back in my day, no. So it actually started when. All right, so shit. I got to go back to. This was early 2000. I decided I wanted to make comic books, and I had been wanting to do comic books for a long time. I attempted when I was in high school, and it was absolutely pathetic. The story was there, but I did not have the ability or the patience to draw a comic book. And I became obsessed with this idea that I had called Dreams of an Insomniac, which I won't go into here, but I had this whole comic book idea for that. And I was kind of building this universe in my head about like what could be spin-off comics and all that. And of course I wanted to do a Tales from the Crypt style horror story, like an anthology thing. And considering in Dreams of an Insomniac, one of the main villains was the Boogeyman, I reused my old horror movie review website name, which was the Boogeyman's Closet, which is where that name initiated. It had an old tripod fucking horror review site that I used to review movies on called that. And
tripod.
and it was so weird too, because I got into like a war with a guy who ran the House of Horrors, and he ended up fucking hacking my website.
Shit.
I didn't know what to do, so I just shut it down because I was like, I don't know how to fight against this, because I was like 17. But so I always like the name The Boogeyman's Closet, and again, it's based on not only the myth of if you think that you're being haunted by a boogeyman, you're supposed to leave your room and look in through the keyhole. And if you see him rummaging through your room, he's after something that you own. If you see an eyeball looking back at you, he's after you. Now, combine that theory with the old Ghostbusters boogeyman episode where the boogeyman was coming out of everybody's closets and it was like connected to this nightmare network. I had this whole idea of, the boogeyman hiding in the closet and creeping out into your room in the middle of the night to get you. So, boogeyman's closet. But I had proposed to you after it was a couple months of hanging out. I think because we met one very late night at Denny's, which is actually kind of funny how I shouldn't say we met that way, but we hung out that way. We met when I went to a Short of Breath show because I worked with Paul.
Yeah, the bassist in the band that I was in, Paul Yates. I think you guys worked together, right? At Media Play?
Wegmans.
Wegmans. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah, because Paul was always really good about bringing friends to our shows.
It was funny because I actually knew Bill Bilson from when I worked at Media Play because he would always come in and buy video games in the Hardlines department, and he would always ask for recommendations. And I remember sitting there and talking to him about Soul Reaver for like a half an hour the one day before I even knew who he was. But so I knew Bill and I knew Paul and came to the Short of Breath show and met you. And then fast forward like a month later, I was at Denny's trying to sober up a little bit because I had gone out into Canada with some of my coworkers from Media Play, and we all went back to Denny's afterward, but our designated driver had to get home. So, and I wasn't sober enough to drive yet, so I'm like, I'm going to stay here and drink coffee and draw on my sketchbook for a while. And you and Hadalac and I think was Greg with you guys? I think Greg might have been with you guys.
Probably. Yeah, at that time, I pretty much only hung out with the guys in my band before I met the larger crew of Denny's, and we won't get into all of that. But the sort of like lifelong friendships that I have now from Western New York, where I met them all at Denny's. But,
I know, like I said, such a weird story, but it's true.
Yeah. But hell, you met your wife there, right? Isn't that true?
Yeah. Yep, I met Jess there because again she was friends with one of my coworkers from Media Play, and we were all going to grab a bite to eat after work, and Jess met up with us to hang out with her friend Leah, which is how I met her. But anyway, so you guys come into Denny's and we sit and we chat, and you and I ended up discovering a couple things. One, that we have the same exact birthday, which was hilarious. Two, that we liked a lot of the same comic books, and three, that we both liked a lot of the same horror. So like a lot of the 80s stuff, like we talked a lot about Jason that night. We talked a lot about zombies. We talked a lot about comic books. And after that, it was like, hey, this dude's cool. So we started talking more and more and more. And every time we came to Denny's, we would hang out and talk. And the one day I just floated an idea to you. I was like, you know what? I'm working on this short like anthology comic series called The Boogeyman's Closet, and I'm asking any of my friends if they have a story idea that they'd like to write that I could draw. And you came up with this idea of almost like a mummy in a cornfield. Mm-hmm. It was a living scarecrow. So like a cursed scarecrow that was like putting itself back together by stealing people's organs. And I was like, that's fucking fantastic. And it was very much, it reminded me of Tales from the Dark Side, the Mummy episode of the movie, where he's like, stealing people's brain, obviously doing stuff that a mummy would do. But it reminded me of that with like Children of the Corn. And I'm like, this is a lot of fun. So we started kind of spitballing that story idea. Then you came to Denny's a couple days later with this idea for a crazy murderous teddy bear that had the top of its head was blown off, so it looked like it had stuffing brain like exposed. And you drew him with like this crazy little kid that he was like possessing. And we were talking about like how we could do a kind of a horror story with this kid being possessed by this evil teddy bear, this like demonic teddy bear. And our friend Greg looked at him and was like, you should call him Twiggles. And that name, we lost our shit. We were like, that is fucking hilarious. And slowly it devolved into this like ridiculous, over the top comedy, like a very dark comedy with like lots of graphic language and murders. And it eventually became the book Ooh Pie, which was our first comic book together, which is just I look back on that shit and I'm like, how in the hell did we come up with half of this stuff? It's so bizarre. This was like one of those kitchen sink comic books. Everything is in it. You know, we threw everything at the wall and we didn't care if it stuck or not. We put it in the book. Like, it's just.
Oh, we put it in the book. Yeah. We put that Scarecrow character in there, but we made him like a silly comedy character called the Corn Stalker.
He could only speak in like visual word balloons.
Yes, exactly. So, and like Twiggles was constantly trying to figure out like what he was saying, but like you could tell that he could see the word balloons somehow, you know?
Yep.
And there was this old man, this really dirty, foul-mouthed old man that like cast the Necronomicon spell from the Evil Dead franchise on the Necronomicomic.
Yep.
and he summons all these demonic spirits and gets possessed by one and gets transformed into this big like stupid Hulk character that we called Blorg because he said Blorg.
And the funny thing is, like, okay, now we have to explain this. There's no reasoning behind the name Blorg other than the fact that when on way too much caffeine and nicotine, a lot of times, like you, me, Greg, and other people would just sit there and go blarg, 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 blorg. And it would always end with Blorg.
Yeah.
But we would say blarg like a bunch of times, like to the Meow Mix tune. Like it was meow, 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 meow. It was literally the Meow Mix tune. So why we would do that, I don't fucking know. We were 20, we were weird. Like it would, 2021, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But we just, when we were we were like, oh, what should we call him? And then we were just like, Blorg, because we always said Blorg. So he became Blorg. Then we had the evil dog named Sammy, because it was like Son of Sam. He was a dog that was obsessed with murder, and but he was really bad at it.
Yeah. And he was always trying to like tell Twiggles to kill people, but Twiggles couldn't see his thought balloons, so Twiggles didn't understand what he was saying.
And then for whatever reason, we had one of the demons possess the pie. There was an apple pie that the mom was like cooking, and every time she saw it, it looked like dead bugs and weird shit. And eventually she ends up committing suicide because she's like seeing all this horrible shit.
She's scared of the pie. And then we like made the pie, right, in real life. We got an apple pie from Wegmans, I think, and we had these like Halloween decorations, like a fake tongue and like an eyeball and a finger and like fake bugs, and we put them all in the pie and we gave it this like weird dramatic like lighting. We took a photograph of it, and that photo became the cover of the book that we, for some unbelievably stupid reason, decided to call Ooh Pie.
Dude, it's so fucking weird.
And don't forget, one of the demons possesses the little kid that owned Twiggles, and then he just punches himself in the face until he dies.
That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah, we killed off little Greg, little Greggy. And the way it ends, it's like I will stand by this. The ending to me is still fucking hilarious because it is such like a. Like, I don't want to say a letdown, but it's such like a nothing ending where they're gonna kill Dad. Like, they gotta destroy Dad because he's the creator of bedtime, which anytime he says bedtime, Twiggles is rendered useless because he has to obey.
So weird and random.
But like, Dad's eating the pie, and like all of the, like, we got Blorg, Sammy, fucking Cornstalker, Twiggles, and there's a fucking hamster that they were going to kill him with at some point. So he's like holding a hamster. But they go to attack him, and we see Dad is like, he's about to take the last bite of the pie. And we see the face in the pie, like the demon face. And we do the close up. We see the guys jump in the room like, "Rawr!" Like they're going to get him. Dad stares at him for like the comedic timing of this is perfect to me. There's a beat where Dad's just staring at them. We pan back to, they're like, "Grrr." We pan back to Dad, and then he just goes shloomp and just eats the piece of pie.
Yeah.
And all the demons freak the fuck out and go, "Holy shit, he ate Carl!" And they all just depossess what they've possessed and fly away into the night screaming.
Yeah.
Because he ate their fellow demon.
It's like, what the fuck? Oh, and we totally forgot to mention the character Cooper X, who
Oh my
was
god, I forgot about Cooper.
he was a chicken possessed by one of the demons who was a human-sized chicken who just out of nowhere wasn't even introduced in the story. Just out of nowhere kicks the door of the kitchen of the house in and then proceeds to go on this rant where he does the Hooper X speech from the comic convention scene in Chasing Amy. but instead of it being about, the representation of black people in pop culture, it's about the representation of chickens.
In cartoons and comic books, because he makes fun of like Foghorn Leghorn and like, oh my god, there's that like
Uncle Tom Cracker.
Yeah, and then he goes, I forgot how we worded it, but it was like, what do you call that? And Twiggles is like 6 piece and a biscuit.
6 piece.
And he's like, gentrification, motherfucker. Oh my god, there's so many things in there that were like, how did this make it in the comic?
I know. And don't forget too that there's an entire sequence where Twiggles gets really excited that he thinks he's about to kill Dad. So he does a musical number where he sings the entirety of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine by REM, but he changes it to It's the End of Dad as We Know It.
And we actually, and now this, dear listeners, I want you to understand the insanity that is our writing team. We sat in Josh's basement smoking entirely too many cigarettes and drinking entirely too much coffee, going on and on and on, trying to come up with lines that mirror It's the End of the World as We Know It, but that make sense to our comic book world. We rewrote that entire fucking song. Like, we have in the comic book the entirety, like, we have a page dedicated to it where it's like, here are all the lyrics. Because we cut him off halfway through. He's singing and dancing around, and then Blorg and Sammy are watching him, and Twiggles gets embarrassed, so he stops. But we wrote the whole fucking song, and we have it in that comic.
Yeah.
Why did we become obsessed with that necessity? I don't know. But we were for like days. We're like, no, we got to figure it out. We got to figure out what the next verse is.
I know. We got to make it work. And we did. We figured it out. And it probably makes more narrative sense than the original song because ours was about Twiggles trying to kill the dad.
Oh, my God. I still love the fact that our book ends with the line, I like chalupas.
Yeah. That's right, because it both starts and ends with characters driving down a street, like a dark, lonely rural road, having a ridiculously non sequitur conversation that has nothing to do with the rest of the book. But we open this book with characters driving down the road talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then
like that.
They get murdered, and then we end the book with like a different duo in a car driving down the road talking about Mexican food. Again, I don't know why we decided to bookend the story like that, but it made so much sense at the time.
Well, and the funny thing was we weren't going to put in that, like we were going to end. We actually ended originally with Dad laughing maniacally and like panning out to the moon where we see the demons like fly by it. And we kept saying like it didn't feel right. And I remember sitting at work the one day and I'm just like sitting there trying to figure out what we could do. And I typed up this ridiculous conversation and suggested it to you. And then we ended up fine tuning it. Because it was just like, I feel like it needs something. And you were like, dude, no, it's like a bookend. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't even think of that. So we ended up having this conversation where, because the girl hears Dad's like maniacal laughter and she's like, oh, what was that? And he's like, what was what? He's like, she goes, I heard somebody laughing. He's like, yeah, sure you did. I didn't hear anything. And she's like, I did. I heard. He's like, you're always seeing stuff and hearing stuff. I forget exactly the conversation, but he basically goes, it's like that time you saw Jesus in your nachos. And she's like, I saw him, damn it. She's like, he was a zesty Tex-Mex Christ. And then he's like, yeah, sure you did. She's like, you don't believe me. And he's like, what don't I believe? And she's like, that I saw Jesus in my nachos. And he's like, I believe you. Why can't Jesus like Mexican food? It's good eats. She's like, you're an asshole. He's like, what? I think Jesus would like a chalupa. She's like, fuck you. And he goes, I like chalupas. We end the book with I like chalupas.
Oh my God, it was so stupid. And then, of course, just like this episode, we were so self-indulgent to have this whole section of back matter where we drew ourselves into the comic, talking about the comic, and then had like this, behind the scenes like sketches and explanations, as if anybody cared because it was our first comic and we had zero fans. But we're like, well, of
Yep.
course, everyone's going to know what our creative process is, right?
And to be fair, I think that was partially a little bit of like, yeah, to our naysayers, because there was a lot of people that said we would never finish it. So we were just like, yes, we will.
Yeah.
Not
I
only are
mean,
we going to finish it, but we'll show you.
exactly. I mean, it did take 3 years, but we did
Yes.
finish it, and it ended up being an 80-page square-bound graphic novel, which I would think was pretty impressive for our first comic we ever drew.
And to be fair, we got a good review on the Newsarama Indie Spotlight. We
We
did
did.
get a good review. So I was like, I still hold that with honor.
Me too. I was really excited to see that because I used to read Newsarama daily for comic book news, and yeah, they would spotlight indie comics, and I sent them one. And so one day a couple weeks later when I logged on and it said, if ooh pie is wrong, I don't want to be right. I'm like, that's a fucking killer headline. Holy shit.
Yep.
That's about our comic.
That was so cool.
My only regret with that comic in hindsight is that it was the early 2000s and I didn't know that lettering it in the Comic Sans font would not age well.
Yeah.
That's become like the joke font that like it basically shows you don't know anything about comics if you use that font, because it's like the one that just comes with Windows.
Well, now you got to be fair. Also, it was 2001 when we started making this book. We had no equipment. Like, I was literally digitally gray toning that book with a fucking mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I had to hold the button down because if you let it go, it would do another layer of gray. So I had to gray tone that book entirely using a mouse, and it was like learning an entire new skill. You had to learn how to letter and create word balloons. So like we had to learn how to do that with shitty equipment. Like, we had to borrow your wife's old computer that was like not a good computer. Like, we were all poor, young adults at the time. None of us had good equipment. But she had the best computer out of the three of us, so we're like, let's use that.
Yeah. She used to get really annoyed because we would stay up late using her computer that was in her bedroom, so she couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
But
yeah, like we did that, and then so in the Comic Sans thing, like, we didn't have money to buy anything. So it's not like we were buying fonts or buying programs. We were using fucking CorelDRAW 98, and I believe it was like a pirated copy,
Yeah, it was a pirated copy of the educational institution preview of it, because my dad used to work at Niagara University and he just brought some discs home that he found at the college, and it was like, oh cool, like this is supposed to be for use in schools, so it was like free to the school. So
Right.
I just copied it, and I used the original one until the disc died, because old CDs like didn't last that long. But yeah, then we used that pirated version for years.
Dude, I was literally still drawing with CorelDRAW in like 2018.
Oh yeah, I used it for a really long time before I finally discovered something better, for free online. But I also, didn't have a good computer for a super long time. But yeah, not to belabor the point too, but we learned to make comics as we went, because I don't remember the page count exactly, but we drew like 8 or 10 pages of the comic. Well, you drew it and I inked it, and then we redid a few of the pages to make the sequences longer. And then the further we got into it, the more we realized that those first 5 or 6 pages were ass.
They were garbage.
Oh, they were so bad compared to the rest of it.
Well, because like we didn't know how to do it, obviously. But the thing was, like, right off the get-go, it was like trying to cram as much art onto a page as possible. So it didn't have a good flow. It didn't work. Like, we didn't understand like a panel-to-panel flow. And like I was doing weird shit. Like, I was doing triangular panels, and like I was trying to like change up the panels. Like, I was really reading a lot of Voltaire comics at the time, and he didn't really use panels. So I was like all over the fucking place with my paneling. So I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But then after we kind of got into the meat of the story and we were away from it, I remember we both had a long discussion about what we didn't like about the opening and how I was really embarrassed by, like, I was like, this is not putting my best foot forward. I really don't like this. And you were like, yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but I don't either. And I'm like, please do, please tell me, So
Yeah.
we went through it. And then I remember storyboarding with you, like talking about how it should flow. And then when I actually drew it out, I remember two of the things that I was really focused on. It was like a cinematic opening. And I remember doing a couple of the long shots that I loved from the opening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the van is driving down the street and you see like a very long shot of it. I did that with the car. I did the Jeepers Creepers over the shoulder of the scarecrow. I was trying to like mimic horror scenes to give it that like kind of creepy opening, and I feel like it worked. It was just we had to redo it, and sometimes, and we've learned that on this show, sometimes you do have to go back to the drawing board and just start over. And if it's a story worth doing, it's worth doing that for.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was the right choice too, because like you said, we had to put our best foot forward, and by the time we got to the end of it, the artwork was like two different people were drawing.
Oh yeah,
like it was like it didn't even look like it was the same people at all. So we wanted to make sure that opening sequence like looked better, but it made more sense. We let it breathe. We gave it more pages. We had to shuffle the page count. So there's actually like one or two extra pages toward the end where we were like, the page turns just don't work because they have to be like, if you want to have a double page spread, you have to start it on the odd page and then the even page so you get the double page spread. So it like screwed up the number count of the pages. So there's an extra page toward the end where it's just an empty doorway and then the characters jump out of it, but we drew a whole page of a blank doorway just to like it'll be like funny pacing, like a pause. And I think it works, but it was a weird concept. But yeah, I think all of this is leading up to talking about like the origin story of us as like a writing team, because we learned to write together on that comic. When we first started it, like you said before, the Cornstalker and Twiggles were like my original ideas. What ended up in the comic was not at all what I had originally planned. It was just random characters that I had scribbled in my sketchbook that weren't anything until you were looking to collaborate, and I was like, well, I have a couple of things in my sketchbook, we can like figure it out. And at first it was like I was writing the script and you were drawing it, but I didn't know how to write comics at the time, and I had only been reading comics again that year, because I read comics when I was a kid. I quit all through high school, and it was in the year 2000 that I started reading comics again, so I was new to it myself.
Well, and I remember back then I'd go to House of Fantasy and I'd bring my bag of comics with me. And like both you and Steve would a lot of times be like, ooh, what's this? And like, sometimes would read an issue right there at Denny's or borrow it after I was done. And like we started trading our comics back and forth all the time. So both of us were kind of like getting back into comics around the same time. But I'll be honest, like I didn't know how to draw a comic. Like, you were like, you didn't know how to write a comic. I didn't know how to fucking draw a comic. Like I had to learn how to do that. And one would argue maybe I failed at that, but like I feel like with our follow-up comic, it was a hell of a lot easier because with Bort, the funny thing with so Bort, just for those listening that don't know the story, Bort we used as an exclamation. Now, yes, the original joke comes from The Simpsons with, where Bart is complaining that he can't find his name tag. And he's like, Bort? Who's Bort? Like that whole thing. And we always joked about that. Like, it's like one of the old Batman onomatopoeia, the biff, bang, pow, Bort. We joked about that. So we're like, it's perfect for a comic title. We did a variety show on paper where we were the hosts, like fictitious versions of ourselves were the hosts. And it all started because while I was laid up sick, I had an abscess, a really bad one. I want to say Christina was either out of town visiting her mom or something. It's when you lived in Buffalo. Yeah. Because you were home alone for a couple days.
Yeah, she was in Italy visiting her sister. Her mom was with her too. Yeah, she and her mom separately both flew to Italy, where her sister had been living for a while, who now has been living in the UK for the last 15 or so years. So yeah, Christina was gone in Italy for 4 or 5 days, and I don't even remember why. I don't remember what my impetus was, but I remember I was bored. We didn't have cable, like, like no streaming or anything at the time, and this was like 2005 or six,
Yeah.
and I just sat down at the table one day, like, okay, I'm just gonna draw something, like, to fill the time, and I ended up drawing a 4-page silent comic about a mongoose who hunts a cobra, and then they have like a ninja fight.
Snake eater.
That's right. And I have a whole like half a page sequence where the mongoose, like in slow motion, bites the cobra in half.
I am actually looking at it right now as I had a copy of Bort laying nearby. Yeah, like it's still, I gotta say, man, like it's still a good looking, it's still a good looking segment. It's
Thanks.
all silent except for like the hissing sound
Mm-hmm.
and then the sleeping sounds at the end. But I mean, I look at my art and I'm like, oh fuck, that's rough. But it was a variety show on paper, and this was one of those ones where when you were like, okay, here's Snake Eater, I'm like, well, fuck. You just one up the shit out of me. I'm like, I gotta come back with something. So then I did Cecil the Vegan Zombie. Where it was,
yeah, I remember that. I love that idea.
and it was just this ridiculous, like it was mostly a study in pacing, like the zombies coming back to life, like walking through the graveyard, then coming upon the Stop and Shop where they break in and just like murder and eat everybody except for Cecil, who has a cabbage and an eggplant. But yeah, we had so many things like the Apes of Wrath. We had the Secret Life of Bats. Oh my
yeah.
God.
The Secret Life of Bats. That was another one of those things that I just drew randomly because I was bored, where it's like you see Batman in the Batcave and he's got one of the Robins in like a big glass tube, like he's fattening him up to eat him.
He's actually eating another Robin while
Oh yeah, that's right. He's like watching porn while he like eats a limb.
Yep. And then there's the Turd Burglar, which was the monkey who stole people's poo.
For some reason.
And of course the Styx comics. The Styx were,
oh god.
So the idea with Styx was to be as offensive as humanly possible, but draw stick figures. Now these did not age well, and I'm not going to repeat them on the air. But I'm not going to lie, dude. Some of these are still really funny. Like it's pretty fucked up, but it's like I think Pickup Sticks is.
Oh god.
I still think that one's really funny.
Yeah. But like they're so wrong in that way that shock comedy was the height of creativity in the late 90s and early 2000s. You think of things like what Kevin Smith does, or like Howard Stern was so popular at the time. It was like, doing and saying the most fucked up, screwed up thing that you could say was hilarious, because I feel like all of comedy at the time was just, oh no he didn't, so
Absolutely.
In order to be funny, we were like, oh yeah, we have to have Batman eating kids and monkeys stealing poo and stick figures having prison sex.
Well, then we got bad idea. Okay, this one I still think is funny. The bad ideas for Halloween costumes.
Oh god.
Where we just had this little asshole who was like torturing people. Like it was like the one was the Human Torch, and it just shows this kid like lighting his friend on fire with an aerosol can, saying "Flame on!" And then there's a kid dressed as a pirate, and the other kid chopped his hand off and shoved a hooked clothes hanger in there, and he's like, "Now you look like a real pirate." And then there's the Visible Man, and he's skinning him, and he's like, hold on, I'm almost done here.
The urinal.
Oh god. And he's just silently weeping. But yeah, just the way this comic opens, like it's it starts with 3 panels of, we had this homeless guy named Lonely Joe.
Oh,
and it's just
Lonely
3 panels of the exact same thing. It's just Joe standing there looking, and then the last one he says, I eat puppies. And then it's Welcome to Bort, a graphic periodical.
Yeah. And of course, because we're so in love with ourselves, we drew ourselves into that comic too. But
oh yeah, we were the hosts. But
yes,
I do have to say, this I loved this because it was so fucking ridiculous. Like, it reminded me of Penny Arcade. How Penny Arcade, like, the Gabe and Tycho in the comics are not Gabe and Tycho in reality. So this is like weird comic versions of ourselves. Like, I am nowhere near as fat as I actually am in real life in this comic. But like, both of us are ridiculous. Your shirt constantly changes, like, in every panel. There's one where it says, "I love your mom." Another one says, "The cheese stands alone." Rocky Dennis is my hero.
And our personalities were so different too, because you were like this like domineering, like taskmaster, constantly trying to get me to draw the comic, and I would just be bouncing around going, "Wee!"
Exactly.
And then I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me if it was you or me, but we end up like kidnapping this little girl named Mindy and chaining her to a drawing table and making her draw the comic for us.
That was me. So basically the back and forth is, I started off trying to get you to work, and then there's the section Myth Crackers, where it was the the guy was at Bix Biggleby. Is that, yes, Bix Biggleby. He's the host of Myth Crackers, and he's talking about the Pop Rocks and Soda myth, and we make little Billy eat the Pop Rocks and Soda.
Oh, God.
And then he explodes. And then he talks to the the fucking redneck who thinks that he's seen a unicorn who come down from space and probed a squish spider. But that slowly devolves into like weird stick figures, and he's like, "I'm a unicorn now," and then you jump in, you're like, "What the hell?" And then you walk into the art room and you're like, "Hey there, Lunchbox, what the hell is going on with page 11? This isn't in the script." And then you look over and it's just Mindy sitting there. He's like, "Who the hell are you?" She's like, "Mindy." He goes, "What the hell are you doing in my house?" "Drawing." And he's like, "Yeah, I can see that, but why are you drawing instead of Lunchbox?" "Who's Lunchbox?" "The fat guy." "Oh. He said I couldn't leave until the book was done or he'd eat my dog." And she holds up her wrist in chains, and he goes, "Yeah, he does that."
Yeah.
And then basically you enforce her to draw, and you find me eating a bunch of tacos, playing the Pretendo 2 in my underwear, and then eventually you put me down in a well, saying it puts the pencil to the page or else it gets the hose again.
God. I haven't read this in so long. I'm listening to this like eating popcorn. Like, this is an adventure. Like, where is this gonna go next? Like, it's so stupid and nonsensical. Like, I don't know what the fuck we were like smoking. Although ironically, like, neither one of us were smoking anything at the time.
Not at all. Well, and the funny thing with this, like, not to keep going off about it, but one of the things we tried to do, and I feel like it may have failed a little bit, but it was a cool concept, is we wanted to do like different mediums all throughout. So like the cover is painted. So it's a painted cover. Unfortunately, it didn't hold up very well because the digital transfer of the acrylic painting is really dark. But we did a painted cover. Then we did hand-drawn and digitally shaded interiors. Then we did the pickup sticks and the sticks things that were just straight up, ink with no fixes. Like, we didn't even use a ruler to do the panels.
No, just stick figures with, all mistakes on the page.
Yep. We even did there was some of Mindy's drawings were in crayon. You did all of Snake Eater, all the shading was done in pencil. Mm-hmm. So it's got that mixed medium look to it. And then the very tail end, like the back cover was a digital drawing. So it was done old school digital. It was an interesting concept, but I feel like we just didn't know how to do it correctly yet.
Yeah, we had a second issue plan that was supposed to be formatted like a newspaper, like Sunday comic insert. We were going to call it the Fun Day Sunnies. And I think that's kind of where it fell apart, because we had a lot of fun ideas for that issue, but it was hard trying to make them all work as like comic strips for a newspaper. But I have several like 1-page or 2-page comics that I did, and I don't draw that much, and I didn't draw much back then, but every once in a while I'd get a bug to draw something. I did a follow-up to The Secret Life of Bats, which was what's it called? It was like the horrible truth about aliens.
For Bort 2, this one I'm still proud of to this day, and I actually showed it in my first ever art show. I had two bits. There was the Roadrunner bit, which this is how the setup of the comic was is we would introduce it, we would do a segment, and then the segment would cut back to us talking, and then we'd introduce another segment. So it's like we were the hosts of the book. So one of the things is like we see the Roadrunner, and it's an entire silent page of just him running from the distance, running past all the red rocks, running along. He turns, he looks at the viewer and goes, meep, meep, and keeps going. And then eventually he hits a fucking razor wire that's stretched across the road, and his fucking head gets lopped off. And his headless body runs a few more feet and falls over. And then Wile E. Coyote pops up behind a rock and goes, "Ha! Fuck you!" And then it cuts to us sitting on the couch talking, watching this on TV. And on the TV, you see the coyote skinning the bird. Like just fucking prepping him for food. That one cracked me up. And then the G.I. Joe versus Cobra, where I have a Cobra soldier yelling "Cobra," and then G.I. Joe go "Yo Joe," and they're shooting, and it's just panel after panel, and their faces are getting more and more distorted as they're screaming bloody murder, and there's like shells flying through the panel. And then the final panel is just them literally standing in front of one another, completely missing each other and shooting everything around them, just screaming and drooling. And it was like, it was so dumb, but it was really funny.
Yeah, I think you just like summed up what most of Bort and Upai were. It was just dumb, but really funny. And, we were just cracking ourselves up. And, on top of the actual comics that we finished, that we wrote and drew Upai as a graphic novel and the first issue of Bort and part of Bort issue 2. But all along over those couple of years we were working on Upai, we did go back to the original concept of the Boogeyman's Closet as like an anthology series. And even though we didn't draw any of them, we sort of had them, in the hopper, because we had written a bunch of short comic scripts, everything from 1-page comics to up to about 8 pages. We had like holiday ones. And we picked like thematic ones, like let's do our own versions of like Universal Monsters, or let's do our own versions of like different like phobias and fears. And you and I both wrote like a stack full of those scripts. Like, okay, we're gonna get to this. Like after we do Bort, like this is what we're gonna do. We'll stop doing like the goofy stuff and we'll do like these horror comics. But then we also wrote a bunch of other stuff along the way, like a ton of other, comic scripts that we started or finished, in some cases for graphic novels and for other series. We had this comedy series with this character that you used to draw called Captain Fats, and
Yes.
we had this whole book called The Price City All-Stars, where it was like Captain Fats and his ridiculous Justice League version of a super team that included a Christmas elf.
I love that his Robin character was named Throbbing Justice.
Yes, Throbbing Justice, who wore a condom on his head. Ironically, there is a local comic book creator here in Austin named Dan Price who has a little bit of notoriety because he used to do a comic called The Latex Avenger, which has a very similar design. But yeah, and then mostly it was you, but we brainstormed a whole 5-issue series as a sequel to Upai. We brainstormed it together, and then you wrote the scripts out, and I think we had started like storyboarding those, trying to like figure out how it was going to work. But man, those scripts were fucking hilarious. And at that point we had learned so much about making comics and writing comics that, if you were to compare the non-existent script for Upai to what we did for, what was it, Night of the Living Teddy?
There was Night of the Living Teddy Revenge of the Living Teddy. The original sequel where we meet up with Lucy the Toy Slayer. She becomes known later in life. But it was the new family that moves into the Upai house. And then and that whole story came from the fact that, like, once again, early on in our relationship as partners here, neither one of us wanted to step on the toes of the other one. We were a little afraid to. So it was more like, yeah, just go with it. Like, see where this goes. And I remember we hit a low point with Upai where we weren't even sure if it was going to finish. Like, we were really struggling with how to make the story work. And we were sitting on your porch in Chilai, And I vividly remember this, lighting up a clove cigarette and you saying, well, like, okay, if you were to write it, what would you have done? And I
Yeah.
went, Child's Play with a Teddy Bear.
Yeah.
And you went, you motherfucker. And you got mad. Like, you were like, dude, why didn't you say anything? And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And like, so then we started talking about it and we're like, well, if we ever do a sequel, we'll do Child's Play with a Teddy Bear, which is kind of what we did. We still kept it in the Upai vein. We still had some ridiculously raunchy and horrible things that we're not going to talk about here. Like we had some really fucked up scenes in that book.
Yeah. Well, you have to push the envelope with the sequel, right? So
of course.
We went to some places.
We had a splash page that I still think about the fact that I drew that. I'm like, wow, that is something that I drew. That had a lot of perverse things in it.
Yes. Yeah, we don't need to get into the details.
No, but holy crap. But so we did half of that comic, and it was one of those things where it's like, you know, we were working on it, but while we were working on it, we kept thinking like, is this going to be the end of Twiggles? Because the idea is much like, you know, The Empire Strikes Back. Twiggles wins at the end. He gets away, like, you know, leaving only one survivor. So we're like, well, what would happen next? And I remember what was the kickoff point for that was when I was living in Rochester, I was trying to go to bed and I couldn't stop thinking about Twiggles and like what would happen. And I got the line in my head of he came to the city and the city was there, but with Twiggles. And I started cracking up and I was like, I got to go write this. And I wrote Twiggles going to the big city, like just a couple of pages. And I sprung that on you the next time we worked together. And you were like, no, dude, this has legs. And we sat there and figured it out beat for beat. Like you came up with the Stygian Kid and like all of these other characters. Like we redid the Doom Crew or whatever we were calling them. But instead of a dog, there was the crazy ferret named Pookie.
That's right. Instead of Blorg, there was Blarg, who was like a gender swapped version.
She was a trucker.
Yes.
Like this big angry ogre.
We don't need to mention what the Cornstalker analog was in the sequel. We'll have to leave that one as a juicy mystery.
Let's just say he had a different outfit. But yeah,
it was made of leather, a lot of leather. Listeners, if you're interested, you'll have to ask Mike in person because I'm not gonna say.
There was a fucking giant robot battle at the end.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
There was a fucking kaiju fight, and like Dad was a serial killer, like hunting people down in the streets, and there was this whole detective murder mystery, and it tied in with Captain Fats, and like that went in such crazy directions. But again, that was kind of like where we learned to write together. The Boogeyman's Closet short stories, and then doing the follow-up to Upai. Like we really figured out the pacing.
Yeah, and I think we also figured out that making the actual comics is so time consuming that it was it was frustrating because our hands couldn't keep up with all the ideas that we had and all the stories we wanted to write, and we had these scripts that were just piling up and going, you know, nowhere, that it started to get, like, at least for me, like really frustrating and disheartening.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Like while we are both artists, I feel like both of us enjoy writing more than the actual creation of the artwork. Because like, don't get me wrong, I love drawing, but I get more jazzed when I'm writing because like I'm crafting this whole world, you know, and I have a lot more fun doing that than I do drawing because like it takes so long. Like with drawing, I'm constantly telling myself like, you know, trust the process. You'll get there. You just got to, you know, you got to keep doing this. And especially now with my carpal tunnel, it takes me even longer. So with writing, it's more fulfilling. So we both realistically, if we continued with the comic thing, we would have had to hire artists to draw all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and we had started asking around locally in the Buffalo area, like trying to kind of informally hoping to find someone who could help us, you know, somebody who could do lettering or inking or like just something, and we had tried to get other people to like submit comic strips to us, like, yeah, do a 2 or 3 page comic and we'll put it in board, and it'll be like, for us it was like, cool, like we can fill the page count up and then we can start working on the next episode or next issue to get it out quicker. And we did get one person, to submit a page to the first issue of board, but there just wasn't any interest. And in hindsight, I understand it. At the time I was like, I don't get, like, this is so hard, and like none of our friends really seem like they're into it. Like they all think it's funny to kind of brainstorm at Denny's about goofy characters, but it didn't seem like anybody was really into it. Again, we had a lot of naysayers even amongst our friends, and yeah, in hindsight I look back and I realize like how ridiculous the ideas were, and how like adult and like X-rated a lot of that stuff was. And I can kind of understand why people were hesitant to like jump on that ship with us. But and that was part of the problem I started having, and I don't want to get into the details of the sort of the dark years, as we'll say, but the shortest version of that, to kind of skip ahead to the podcast, is again, I was just getting really disheartened, and it was frustrating. It was slow, and I felt like it was like we were never going to realize these dreams because it was just the two of us. And we put Upai into some local stores and bought into some local comic shops, and they weren't selling well. We got a good review online. We sold some books online. It wasn't like we didn't sell anything, but it was like this isn't like instant success that we were hoping it was gonna be.
Well, and it was very disheartening to put all that work in and then get turned down by every publisher that we submitted to. And like that was part of the problem. It's like the amount of work followed by the absolute nothing payoff. Like the best thing that we could say about Upai is that we got a great review on Newsarama, and that, hey, it was a challenge that we succeeded in. Like we didn't give up, we succeeded. Yeah. So, but like it's not really the win that you're hoping for. So yes, it was extremely disheartening. And then of course life took us in two different directions. You ended up moving, so it was like that was going to make it a hell of a lot harder to work together on artwork. We could still write together, but it was like life just kind of took us in two different directions. And then of course we both had kids, and it's like life gets in the way, as it were.
Absolutely. And I've always, not to get too like maudlin here, but I've always kind of taken the blame for some of those dark years, because where my life was going, my wife's family was this very conservative Christian, like evangelical, like hardcore traditional family. And when we had a kid and we were looking for family support, and her family was more available, and we ended up moving to Texas to be near to them, and then the influence of all of that being around us, and we were going to church and kind of like falling into that lifestyle. And then at the same time, people knew that I was making comics, but I couldn't show them to anybody because they were so raunchy, so dirty. And at first I was just like, well, I'm just going to pick my audience, but it's like I couldn't sell them at work, and I couldn't sell them to people in my family. It was like, man, our audience is so limited because there's not a lot of people that we can sell these to that I know. Like I can't just like call up all my friends and be like, hey guys, sell them to your aunts and uncles or whatever, because it wasn't that kind of comic. And then with that like religious influence, I reached a point where I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Like not this type of comic. Like if we're going to make something, we need to make something else that I can not be embarrassed to like show my father-in-law, the preacher,
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know that you were getting kind of down on like, well, maybe being a comic artist isn't like the thing for me, because it's really hard and it's not working. And we just started pursuing other creative endeavors, and then living all the way across the country from each other, thousands of miles away. We weren't hanging out the way we used to. We had a couple of like arguments and fallouts, and after a while it was just like, well, okay, well, I guess that period is over.
Yep.
But then fast forward to when you started working in the Boogeyman's Closet with Maurice was one of the original hosts, right? It was Maurice and Tara Mitravich and Mike McCoy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I started listening to that. I think I had learned about it on Facebook like 4 or 5 episodes in, because the Facebook algorithm has sucked for years.
Yes.
And I have to admit, and I think I've told you this before, like when I first heard the Boogeyman's Closet podcast, again 3 or 4 episodes in, I remember thinking to myself, well, shit, like he didn't tell me about this. Like, why did I have to hear about it from Facebook? I was a little bit hurt. But granted, we weren't talking all the time. We weren't like besties as much anymore, just because, again, our lives had gone different directions, and we had kids and other obligations. And But then I was like, you know what, like, fuck it, I'm not gonna be petty. I'm just gonna listen. I'll just be the biggest fan. And I just, I kept listening. And the more I listened to the podcast, the more I was like, man, I could do this. Like, I want to be on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Like, I want to be a guest. But again, because we weren't as close as we used to be, I felt kind of awkward just asking, like, hey man, like, when's it my turn to be a guest? So I was just kind of waiting. And you started doing your Friday the 13th specials, and I think that's, and again, you'll have to remember this for me, but I think I had said something to you like, hey man, just so you know, Friday the 13th Part 6 is like my favorite movie ever. So,
Yep.
Hint, hint, you know?
Well, and it was funny because like at the beginning I didn't want to ask people to fill in. Like I hated asking people to fill in, because like I felt like it was such short notice and like I don't know, it felt like a big commitment to me to be like, hey, go watch this movie, spend 2 hours of your life watching this, and then come and spend another 2 hours of your life talking about it. So it's like it felt like a big ask. So I hated doing that in the beginning. But once people started asking me like, hey, I'd like to guest on there, I was like, oh, people want to? Okay, cool. So it's like, and then I started bringing people in. Like I brought in like Dawn came on and Hibbard came on and Michael May came on. And then when we did the Friday the 13th ones, I want to say it was when we did part 5. You had mentioned like, hey, just so you know, part 6, that's my favorite. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like you should totally join us. Like, because
Yeah.
at that point I was like, fuck yeah, like bring people on. So you joined us for part 6, and I want to say there was one other one. Did Tegan join us for that one?
Well, we did other Friday the 13th. Tegan joined us for Jason Goes to Hell because Tegan really likes that movie. Like, I know a lot of people don't, but that was later on. At that time, the one that I remember, because this was the linchpin for Raise by Rentals, was
Shaun of the Dead.
And Predator was the one I was actually thinking of.
Oh yeah, that was you and O'May, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think and Predator was one where when we were done, I was like, that was so much fun. I want to do more podcasts. Like, I don't want to just like copy you, but I was like, man, like I want to do more of this. And so I got over myself and just started asking you, like, could I guest on certain episodes? Yeah. And we did Shaun of the Dead. I think Tegan might have been on that one. I can't recall now.
Now, that one was definitely, it was you, me, and Susie. I only remember because that was the first one Maurice ever missed, because he had a concert. And he was like, dude, I'm not going to be able to do Shaun of the Dead. And I was like, no, don't even worry about it. I was like, you never miss. You can totally miss this. I was like, plus Strasberg said he would join. And he was like, oh, all right, cool. So I remember getting you on for that. And I felt bad because you and I just both steamrolled Susie because we both love that movie so much.
Yeah.
And we were just back and forth, like talking about every scene. And then afterward, I remember texting you before I went to work. And I was like, dude, that was so much fun. I was like, we got to do more of these. And you were like, yeah, dude. Like, we were just texting like other movies we should do. And then I don't know who said it first, but one of us was like, why don't we just do our own podcast? I don't know if it was me or if it was you.
I think it was me because, like I said, after the Predator episode, when I started thinking like, man, I could do this. I want to do more of this. Like, that was fun. That's when I got over my hesitation about just asking, because obviously you were also welcoming, which was great. And then, being able to come back. And then after we had that like amazing chemistry on the Shaun of the Dead episode, that's when I was like, okay, see, I was right. Like, we got to do one of our own. Like, this was great.
Yep.
And I remember mentioning it to you where it was something along the lines of like, hey, I hope you don't think I'm going to copy you, but I really think I want to do my own podcast. I had this idea, like,
That's
maybe
what
you
it
could help
was,
me
yes.
out. And you were like, help you out? Fuck, I'll be on it. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm so glad you said that because I didn't want to ask you. But at the same time, I knew that it had to be a you and me thing because I wanted to go back and do, some kind of, storytelling, because I knew that that's what our strength was. And we didn't really understand the improving until like after we recorded that whole first episode and we realized like what we had just done, so the first episode is a little clunky because we're like, okay, well, we kind of have this idea, where we wanted to tell stories, but we didn't quite understand what the template was. But yeah, it was just like we were so in sync right from the first episode that I was like, oh God, I'm so glad we did this. Like, I feel like the gang's back together after all these years of like not being as close and not talking as much and not working on anything together. It was like, it felt like the old comic days again.
Well, yeah, and there was a brief period before the podcasting thing where you and I both started sharing stories we were working on. So it was like stories that we were working on in our spare time. And I don't want to name any of the stories in case we still do them, but I think what brought it together was I had brought up the Place in Between, how I always liked that story that you came up with, and I really wanted to work on that. And I started kind of like just taking a crack at writing what I thought it could be. And then we just kind of spitballed back and forth with those scripts. And then you started sharing with me a novel that you were working on, and I was like enamored with it. I thought it was fucking fantastic. And then unfortunately, as we've discussed, a lot of times multiple ideas happen at the same time, and Hollywood had a very similar idea, and it was like, well, fuck.
Yeah, that happens to me so many fucking times.
Dude, same. Like, dude, you remember when we saw the remake of Dawn of the Dead in the theater, and we got to the bus scene, and I lost my shit because I was like, damn it, I wrote that into The Dead Will Walk the Earth. Like,
yes, I recognized it. I read that script, and I'm like, yeah, The Dead Will Walk the Earth. Like, that was this comic, horror zombie comic you've been working on for years. That was going to be like your magnum opus as like a zombie fan. And then like there was like several things in the Dawn of the Dead remake that you had in your script, like. And again, I don't want to keep beating this dead horse, but there's one that Tegan keeps bringing up where, and I don't know that I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I had this idea and I worked it out, and I remember sending it to you. This was before we were doing the podcast together, and it was one of those things where I sent to you like, what do you think of this? And I had this, it was like 17 text messages, I kept maxing out the character count because I had so much, and it was this idea for like a young adult illustrated novel, or maybe a comic, but like this young adult story about a fantasy world that is based on Polynesian culture. And my pitch was that it was Sharknado meets The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, because they have this Polynesian society living on floating islands where all of the ocean water in the earth has all been like pulled up into the atmosphere. So instead of having like flat water, you just have these giant superstorms, like giant tornadoes, and literally all of the ocean life was living in these giant water funnels that were floating around the earth. And the people who lived on these islands had to constantly keep the vigil to be safe from these giant storms, until this girl whose name was Ocean discovers that there are other places in the world beyond their islands, beyond the storms, and she's like basically going for help because their food source on their island is dying out and like going extinct. It was this like type of snail. And then I'm sitting in a movie theater like 6 months later, and what comes on but the trailer for fucking Moana, about a Polynesian girl who lives in this in this fantasy world where the food source on the island is dying, and she has to travel the ocean to find the cure for her culture. And the word Moana means ocean. Yep. And I'm like, God damn it, they stole my whole thing, except for the floating islands.
I was fucking heartbroken when you, because I had been reading along. You had been sending me bits of that script, and I remember telling you about a painting I wanted to do based on it. Like, I was so jazzed by the visuals that you were coming up with, and then you texted me you were like, dude, look up Moana, and I was like, what? And I looked, I was like, dude, no, I was so bummed.
Me too, man. I was so sad for so long, but I eventually was like, you know what? It'll come around again. It'll have its time. There will be a time in the future when people will see my idea and not instantly associate it with the latest Disney movie. Eventually it'll come around. So I do still want to tell that story. I wrote a lot of it. It's called the High Seas. Get it?
Yep. No, dude, I remember this was one of my favorite stories that you'd wrote. There's a few that you've come up with that every time you had a new bit that you wanted to text me about, I was I was super jazzed, and that was one of them. But yeah, I mean, that it kept happening to both of us, and I do remember when we first came up with the idea for Raised by Rentals. One of the things we had talked about was, what is it going to be about? And we kept wanting to do movies because we're like, oh, well, that's easy. We can watch a movie and talk about it. That's what we do on Boogeyman's Closet. But we were like, well, we don't want to copy the Boogeyman's Closet, so what do we do? And I think it was you that had suggested fixing movies.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a fun idea.
Yeah, originally you were the one that had suggested of hey, we've always had these ideas for well, what would we do with like the sequel that never happened?
Yes.
Like the Friday the 13th in the snow, like that, that sequel that had been talked about by the original actual creators that like never happened. Like, hey, like what if we just talked about that, like the movies that never happened? And
Right.
then I was like, yeah, like what if we just told our own stories? Like what if we just like, well, this is what we would do, like not just talk about the movie that didn't exist, like Boogeyman's Closet is movies that do exist and Razor Rentals with movies that don't exist, but it's like, oh no, like let's fill in those gaps and like let's say, hey, if it did exist, this is what it would be, this is how we would make it. Or we take some existing property that sucks and we're like, well, this is what they should have done, in our
Mhm.
hubris, like, well, this is how you fix it, poor soul.
Exactly.
But we literally did that first episode of like Jason in the Snow and had no intention of improving the story beat by beat from beginning to end. But when this episode was over, we were like, holy shit, did we just do that? Like we told the whole story.
And I'll never forget this was one of Omay's first comments, is that he said that listening to the two of you was like watching someone play 4D chess.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Which
that comment.
I still wear that as a badge of honor. Like, I know it meant that we were confusing as hell. I get it, but man, that made me happy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of good feedback from the first episode. Hell, even a friend of mine from high school that I hadn't talked to in 20 plus years, like hit me up on Facebook and was like, I randomly saw the ad in my feed, because you were my like suggested friend. I listened to it and I thought it was great, and we got to talking and like kind of like rekindled an old friendship. And I'm like, that first episode had so much great feedback and like positive things that came out of it that I was like, well, of course we have to do another one. And it took us until like the third episode to kind of figure out the format, and we kind of ditched that whole like fake video store theme that we were going for, and just
Oh
we're like,
yeah.
what. Yeah, because originally it was supposed to be like Razor Rentals was a video store, and we were going to pretend that people would come in and like, oh, well, that movie sucks, and this is what they should have done. Like people picking movies out of like the different genre shelves. But it was so complicated because, as you mentioned on one of our other episodes, it's like we tend to always overcomplicate things because we're really trying to like take it seriously and like really do something interesting and as original as we can. But then we very quickly realize, okay, we shot for the moon and this is the comfortable place where we landed, and all the other stuff, we're just going to leave that behind.
Right. And I like, it's shocking to me that this is what we're going into season 4.
Yeah.
Like,
Season 4. I know this episode has gone on way longer than I expected, being so navel gazing. But yeah, this is the 86th episode that we've done. It's the 6th Super Gushers episode, which was, the second series of like spin-off episodes that we've done, because we started doing our rental rants in season 1, which was just an excuse to have an episode where we didn't have to do an improv, because I mean we could every time, but it was nice to just have a conversation like this one about other things. And
yeah.
it was easy to kind of zero in on like, well, we talk about like things we should fix in our favorite movies, TV, and games. So like, well, why do we want to fix them? Like what pisses us off about it? And that's kind of what led to that. And then Super Gushers was, well, I'm sick of being so negative all the time. Like I want to talk about stuff about pop culture where we can kind of celebrate it instead of pissing on it all the time. So now we get together and gush about stuff.
Gosh. Yeah, like that. The whole idea of adding the Super Gushers and the rental rants, it was like a nice little break, because there were a few times, and I don't know if we want to talk about this, but there were definitely a few times where we crashed and burned, and we had to fix it. We had to come back and be like, okay, wait, let's re-examine this because it wasn't going the way we wanted.
Yeah, no, that's a great segue into the last segment here of the episode, where we kind of talk about some facts and figures a little bit. And I don't think we need to belabor the point as much as we have in previous episodes, kind of going into all the different genres and stuff we touched on. But yeah, you're right. Back in that first season, there was only one time that we ever had to like stop a recording and like come back to it. But there were definitely episodes where we stopped in the middle of the recording and we're like, dude, like, where is this going? Like, what are we doing? And that's kind of where that joke came from. where we always threatened that one of these days we're going to crash and burn and like drive the improv into the ground and have no idea how to finish it, because we came pretty close a couple of times.
Yeah, we did.
Back in the first season, I think the first time that happened was with Tower of Snakes, our adaptation of Snakes and Ladders, or Shoots and Ladders, as a movie. We had kind of an epiphany at some point during the improv, but there's some shit that I cut out where we were both just like, where is this going? you know the same thing with Cats Gone Wild, where we did an adaptation of the Wildcats comic book as a live action movie. That one wasn't as bad. That happened pretty early on, where we were like, okay, cool, this is a fun comic, but I don't understand what the movie's about. And then we kind of had to like stop and figure it out before we were like, okay, now we're recording again. Like, let's repeat what we just said for the audience, And in season 2, I think we were much more successful by then. We had really like settled into our format. Whose Improv Is It Anyway? That was our first original like improv game that we did, and the first original story that wasn't really based on anything. It was technically based on Mousetrap and like Looney Tunes and McGruff the Crime Dog and a couple of different things, but that's not really where it came from.
That was the game one though, because it was a bunch of, we had to work with the genre type, like, because it was like, is it a movie, is it a TV show, is it a comic book, is it a video game? And then we had to do like, is it a crime noir, is it a horror story? Like, we had all those different things, and so we had to work within the confines of that story. And I remember that was the first time that we had to like actually stop and come back to it the next day, not because we were running out of ideas, but because we had so many fucking ideas, we ran out of time. And I was like, dude, I gotta go to work, we gotta record this tomorrow. So we had to pause and remember where we were.
And I remember being like kind of thrown by that, like, oh shit, like we didn't finish it. It's the first time, we ever didn't finish a recording in one go. 42 episodes, we just did them in one shot. And then, episode 43, we ran out of time. And it's like, oh fuck, this sucks. But again, it wasn't because we were crashing and burning. We were too creative, it was too successful. And to this day, that's our longest episode. It's the only one we ever recorded that breaks 3 hours, at 3 hours and 1 minute. Although on YouTube, it's exactly 3 hours, because I had to cut that minute out because there was like a episode length limit. So I cut out a couple of comments. But yeah, we really, we landed on a pretty good format. Spider-Man 95 was a rough one. That again, at partway through, we were kind of like, okay, like where is this going? What are we doing? And I think when we did our year in review, that was your pick for like the least successful episode. Yeah. Whereas my pick for the least successful episode of season 2 was the League of Extraordinary Arnies, which was that was the last time that we did an Arnieverse installment, where we tried to mash up Kindergarten Cop and True Lies, and like it was okay. We pulled it out. We got the Penguin from Batman Returns in there, but it wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the best success. But looking at season 3 now, so some fresh stats. Let's just start. I'll ask you, Mike, what's your favorite episode from season 3? Which one do you think?
Oh, it's tough, because we did a lot of like original stories, and I always like the original stories. I had a lot of fun with the Hot Garbage prequel and the Vengabus sequel.
For sure.
Those were a ton of fun.
Let's just say, put the originals aside. I think we said that in the last year-end review episode 2, that the originals, they stand out because we're in love with ourselves. We like our own ideas best.
Of course.
So set those aside. Out of all the other episodes we did, like, which one do you think stands out?
Honestly, I think the 2 that I probably had the most fun with, outside of the originals, I really liked We Have RoboCop at Home. I thought that was a lot of fun, because it was the first time we'd ever taken something that's good and tried to make fake producers notes to be like, okay, this is a bunch of producers trying to make it shitty so it'll appeal to everybody, but can we still tell a fun story within those confines? So it was a very fun writing experiment. But plus, I mean, we had a robo monkey in there. Like, it was hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, we improv ruined that one.
I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed Ready Player Joust. I didn't think the Joust one and the Pac-Man one, actually both of those,
Hmm.
Pac-Man Kill Screen and Ready Player Joust, they were two that, and I think it's because there's no story there to Pac-Man or to Joust. There's like nothing, and we got to make up our own story for it.
Hmm.
But to
Yep.
take the idea of Pac-Man and set it as like an early 1980s sci-fi horror, I thought it worked really well. And for Joust to be like this weird post-apocalyptic fantasy story, again, I would have never pictured that because I didn't have that pictured when we first came to the table. And as we
Hmm.
started to build the world, I was like, I really like the world we're creating here. It's a lot of fun. Um, so like those two I really like, but the one based on a movie that I think was right up there with the We Have RoboCop at Home is surprisingly Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter Got Whacked. And the reason is because I came to that not having any fucking clue what to do. I was so lost, and I'm like, dude, it's already a fun movie. What are we going to do to it? And the fact that we played out the movie as is and just injected other scenes into it, dude, I was laughing my ass off listening back to that. So like I really enjoyed that one too.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with all those picks. Would not have thought that you would have picked the Don't Tell Mom episode, but that's really good to hear. Yeah, that was one of those ones where I was so sold on it that I just like steamrolled you into agreeing.
Right. Well, because after watching the movie, I remember texting you being like, dude, I really like the movie. Like, I don't know what we can do with this. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know what to, how
yeah,
are we? And you're like, don't worry about it. Don't worry, but we got this. And I'm just like,
yeah.
okay. I was so nervous.
Well, and that's how I felt about Fright Night Theater, because you were just like, oh yeah, we'll do our like spooky season switcheroo, and we'll do like a horror movie as a comedy and a comedy movie as a horror movie, and the horror movie that would turn into a comedy should definitely be Fright Night. And I was like, really? Like, I don't know how to make that funny. I don't know what to do. That like, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like that one was one of our weaker ones. I will take full credit on that. That I did not have the strongest idea going into that, and
No,
I don't think it's terrible, but I do think it's one of our weaker ones.
yeah, I would agree with that. I don't take full credit for it because again, I went into it going like, I don't know. And I hadn't honestly even seen the movie like in decades. So I was so unfamiliar with it that I just didn't have anything, I didn't have any headcanon already, to kind of like play off of. So
Right.
I was just like, I don't know, I guess this will work. And that's another one where we stopped in the middle of a recording and we're like, wait a second, like, where are we? I'm lost, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, s- I'll say my favorite episodes, and it's really hard to pick. Pac-Man Killscreen's another one where you really wanted to do Pac-Man, and I just was like, whatever, I don't give a shit. Like, I got nothing, but like, whatever. But I really liked the way that one turned out. I was really excited. I can picture that one in my head, like, so cinematically. I know exactly what it looks like.
Oh yeah.
But I think, other than the originals, I want to say I think Tales from the Cryptmas is my favorite improv, and I know that's really fresh because we just did that one. But holy shit, Josh Hibbard came on with the Crypt Keeper and did like the spot on intros and outros, and I know I said we should not include the originals, but we told two original stories that, man, I was so excited that those worked
Hmm.
as Tales from the Crypt style stories, like that I thought we really pulled it off. That I was like, man, we should definitely pat ourselves on the back,
Oh,
after that
absolutely.
one.
Honestly, that and the Bad Rubbish Vengabus sequels, probably my favorite 3 episodes of the season. But taking the originals out,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I 100% agree because I really like the way Bad Rubbish turned out. I love the way that Cotton Eye Joe got into the Vengabus franchise. But yeah, my favorite one besides those, and this might be a hot take, but I liked We Love Halloween and Halloween Loves Us Back, which was a Super Gushers episode where we
Oh
just
yeah.
talked about our childhood Halloween experiences. And I told the true crime story about the killers
Yep.
in Massachusetts when I was a kid. And I find that I like listening to that one. Like, I like just having that chat again and sort of revisiting it about those childhood stories. And yeah, that's probably my favorite one. We can't have too many favorites in terms of my favorite my favorite improv, like based on another movie we did, yeah, I'd probably go with We Have RoboCop at Home. I think that's my favorite one. That was like like an existing property where we didn't really do that much original to it. We just tried to flip it around and change the rules.
Right.
I would agree. My least successful episodes are the ones I thought didn't really work out as well as they could have. Not that they're bad, but yeah, Friday Night Theater I think is toward the bottom of the list. And also, I wish that Over the Big Tap had gone better. It's still a
Yeah.
really fun episode, but like I feel like it's missing a lot of things. Like after the fact, I kept going, "Holy shit, we forgot this, and we didn't think about that. We didn't think about this."
Yep.
And I hate to say it because no offense to my brother, but the Prayer of the Solar Babies episode, while I think that we pulled off what we were going for, I don't know that it's that compelling on its own.
Yeah. Well, because didn't we put it in like the sequel to the trilogy? Like, wasn't that how it worked? Like,
It was we made it so that our fake movie was the second part of a trilogy,
yes.
where Prayer of the Roller Boys is the first movie and Solar Babies is the third movie. So we came up with like a post-apocalyptic style second movie. And again, I thought the story was fine, but I felt like we were so hemmed in by where we had to start and where we had to go that it just wasn't as strong as I would have liked it to have been.
Right. No, I agree. And yeah, I mean, as far as our weakest go, like I would definitely put, for me, the one that I would put at the bottom is probably the Fright Night one. But I think Over the Big Top is right behind it for me. Like I wanted to like that one so much more. And I feel like I just kept, every time I thought that I had something for it, it didn't work. It was like I kept going like, shit, that doesn't work. Shit, that doesn't work. Like there was so many moments of like where I felt like I was going to crash and burn on that one.
Yeah, that's a story that had we sat down together as like a writing team, with paper and pen and worked it out, it could have been great. We could have, researched the concepts and like tried out different scenarios, but doing it live off the top of our heads, it was a little wandering.
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, I feel like this year is the year of the original story because all of our best ones are the originals or stuff like Pac-Man and Joust where we're using an existing property but we're doing something completely different with it. Like don't get me wrong, the Jay and Silent Bob Meet Frankenstein had a lot of fun with it. I still think that's a really funny episode. 100% more Christian Slater, again, I think it was a fun episode.
Mm-hmm.
But like the ones like Never Kill the Dog, Skin Deep, like those I feel like are much better than some of our improvs.
Yeah, I agree. And Flapjack Massacre is another example. And we got to create another like original slasher character, like Jurgen the Yuletide Avenger from the Yule Parish in the season 2. We got to create Pancake Face with Michael May. But yeah, so we did 6 original episodes this season that were just straight original based on nothing really other than inspiration. And that was Flapjack Massacre, the 2 double features we did, which you already mentioned, Never Kill the Dog and Skin Deep, which was our Trigger Warning Twin Bill duo, and then we did the Return of the Vengabus and Bad Rubbish as our Midnight Drive-In double feature. And then I do include Tales from the Cryptmas because while
Absolutely.
the format was based on Tales from the Crypt and we had the Crypt Keeper as our host, the actual content of the episode was 2 original stories.
Well, and it's also kind of like the town that dreaded Festivus. We took the idea of Festivus from Seinfeld and just did a completely original story with it.
Yeah, that's true. You could definitely argue that counts as an original because other than the rules of what Festivus is, like nothing that we did in the story came from Seinfeld. It like the Whose Improv Is It Anyway episode. We always talk about how it's like the Mousetrap episode because it had pop culture stuff in it like Mousetrap and Looney Tunes, but that wasn't our intention going in. Those are just things that came up in the random spinner, but our intention going in was to tell an original story.
Yep. And yeah, I mean, the again, the originals are, I think they are the most fun, but we definitely need to do more improvs in the next season.
Yeah, I think so. And right now, looking at our plans for season 4, there's about, I'd say 10 episodes that are like for sure we're going to do these, like they're on the schedule, they're going to happen, nothing's going to take them off. But we have another 10 to 12 that we're like, yeah, these are strong enough to put them on the list, and we'll see if we still feel as strongly about them like when the time comes next year. But out of the 10 that we just talked about, 3 of them are straight originals that I know for sure we want to do, and one of them is a game, just like the Who's Improv is anyway, and You'll Perish. So I really like the games.
Me
Those
too.
are those are a lot of fun when we just come up with, some rules and some random choices, and then we're forced to roll with the punches and like make a story work. Like they are like terrifying, but in the most fun way.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'll be honest. The You'll Perish, like for some reason the Mousetrap episode didn't scare me as bad as You'll Perish, and I think it was because with that one we had Sam on as the host, kind of throwing us curveballs. Like, and I didn't know what the curveballs were. At least with Mousetrap, I knew what the curveballs could be. So I was like, okay, I know it could be one of these 5 types of tropes or one of these 5 types of characters or whatever. And like, it was like, okay, I can work with that. I can play with that. But not knowing where Sam was going to throw, it's like, I mean, we had a general idea of the types of things she was going to do, but having no prior input, I was pissed scared, man. So like when that came together, I was like, woohoo.
Oh, yeah, it was a huge relief. Yeah, and I originally sent Sam a list, and it was sort of like, here's an example of what I want you to do, and it was like 7 or 8 categories with, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 examples of things to pick from in those categories. I, sort of copied what we did with Who's Improv Is It Anyway, and just, refreshed it for the, sort of the Christmas horror concept. But Sam, being the overachiever, added like 3 or 4 more categories. She put like 10 or 15 choices in every category. And I remember when I actually eventually saw the list, I was like, holy shit, like we could have been screwed if some of these came up. We really lucked out on the random number generator there.
Oh, damn. But yeah, I definitely want to do more games. I think that
Yeah,
was fun.
absolutely. Yeah, games are definitely a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll definitely do some more improvs. I agree. We probably should do some more like straight improvs like we did in our first 2 seasons. Less of the original. Last time we talked about how we wanted to do more original stories, and I think we definitely did that. But maybe we just need to course correct a little bit. Kind of bring it back in just a little bit so we can focus on our mandate of improv, improving our favorite movies, TV, and games. But we definitely have some really cool ones coming up on the schedule. Our listeners are going to vote on one of those, and obviously we just went through all of those, and those are existing properties or concepts that we can improv about. And just to kind of wrap this up with some facts and figures for the nerds like me that care. This season, in season 3, we had a total of 23 episodes, which is less than the first 2 seasons where we had 35 and 28 episodes total, respectively. We did 5 fewer improvs in general, including the originals. We had about the same number of rental rants and super gushers, except for that first season when we did a bunch of rental rants when we first came up with it. But they kind of leveled out. But we did definitely a significantly fewer improve episodes, but that had a lot to do with scheduling this year, with work schedule and family events. And we had a big run in the summer where we just weren't recording or weren't finishing episodes, and that really ate into the schedule, to the point where originally our Midnight Drive-In double feature 2-parter that we did with the return of the Vengabus and Hot Garbage with the sequel Bad Rubbish, that was originally the summertime Drive-In double feature, but I had to change the name because by the time we got it out, it wasn't summer anymore.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely want to try to stick with a better schedule this year. I don't feel bad about it because hey, life's important. Our families and jobs are important, and the recording it's just supposed to be fun. So we don't need to kill ourselves, but just something to kind of keep in mind. And part of that too is this season we had, was it 3? No, we had 2 episodes that we had to record in 2 parts. And, speaking of crashing and burning, we pretty much crashed and burned twice this season. But we kept it a secret from the audience. um, and I say that because we've always talked about how we're going to crash and burn one of these days. And when that happens, okay, cool. Like, we'll roll with it, and we'll kind of make the crash, a part of the episode and talk about what happened and why this fell apart and all of this. But I didn't do that this season. I did some tricky editing to kind of hide the fact, because I didn't think it was so much that we really crashed and burned. It's just that we ran out of time, just like with Whose Improv Is Anyway. But unlike that episode, we were rushing and making bad choices because we were watching the clock, and so that when we hit that time wall, we were just like, fuck, I don't know what to do. But again, it wasn't because of our improv skills. It was because of the pressure of, like, the fucking clock is ticking, dude, hurry up. And we panicked, and that happened 2 episodes in a row. It was our Planes, Trains, and Batmobiles Thanksgiving special and the Town That Dreaded Festivus. 2 episodes in a row where we went into it with maybe not the strongest concept, but like something we could make work. We had fun with both of them, but both times, we ran for like 2.5 hours before we realized, like, this is going nowhere because we're trying too hard.
Yep. And that's it in a nutshell. Is we were focused on the time, and it was like, okay, by the time we started recording, because a lot of times we'll talk ahead of time, like we'll just chat about, like, getting kind of warmed up, just chat about our week, talking whatever, and then we looked down at the time, was like, oh shit, we need to get rocking and rolling. We only got about an hour and a half. Like, we got to do this. So it was already right from jump with both of those episodes. We knew there was a ticking clock, and we would start building out the story and, like, explaining to the audience what it's going to be about, yada, yada, yada. And then once we started getting into the meat and potatoes of the story, it was like, fuck, we got a half an hour. How are we going to do this? So we start trying to rush. And when you try to rush, you start tripping. And that's exactly what happened with both of those. Is like, both of us kind of veered in 2 different directions. And then we were kind of stumbling over each other, trying to figure out, like, well, how do we make this work? And what we really had to do was just stop, take a step back, reconvene when we had no, like, extreme time limit, and just tell the story. And both times it ended up working, because with Planes, Trains, and Batmobiles, we hit a wall where I had no fucking clue what to do. I had a couple ideas I was throwing out, but they didn't mesh with what your ideas were. And, like, we were kind of trying to do 2 different things. We stepped away. I went to work. The next night we got together and recorded. And it was like, before we started, you were like, okay, here is where we were. Here are the beats. Here's what I was trying to do. Here's what you were trying to do. How does this work? And it was like, you figured out a way to make both ideas click together. And then it was like, oh, okay. Once that happened, we were off and running. So it wasn't like there was a lot of, oh, we got to figure this out behind the scenes. It was like, shit, where were we? You laid it out and said, here's what I think. And then once you said it, it was like, oh, okay, let's move on with this. And it was the whole EMP thing. I was trying to make the EMP work. You had an idea of how to get that together. And then once that clicked, the rest of it fell in place. And same thing with the Town That Dreaded Festivus. We were trying to rush through the kills, but we didn't get that, like, cinematic 3D horror movie thing down just yet. We were trying to figure it out. And once we kind of, like, nailed the follow one kill to the next, and the fact that, oh God, I forget his name now, but the Festivus killer, it's Benson, right?
Benson Stills.
That's it.
Yeah.
Benson Stills, like, once we figured out he was a supernatural killer and he could just, like, appear. Like, once we started doing that, it was like, okay, then the kills started coming fast and furious. We got the jokes in, everything started to work. And all it was us just taking a step back without the time limit. That was really the killer of the creativity, was knowing that we had to do it fast.
Yeah, I agree. So we panicked and we rushed through, and things that we would have thought of, or conclusions that we naturally would have come to, we were just blanking, because it's like, fuck, you got to go to work. Hurry up, hurry. And like, that's no help. That's like, trying to cram your homework at the last second. Like, you're going to fuck it up, because
exactly.
And this is creative stuff. So we just need to be able to relax. So again, that's why I kind of fudged it, but I'm mentioning it now for anybody who cares, anybody who wants to, point their finger and ha ha in our direction is yes. If you want to say we crashed and burned, I would say we did so on the Town That Dreaded Festivus. And again, that one was because that one took the most course correction to figure out when we got back together. I had to go back and listen to the episode and summarize it. And then, we were like, okay, fine. Now, we've had a chance to think about it. Let's go in this direction and do something a little bit different. And that was the most like of a swerve, on the second recording. But I don't know if anyone like would notice like where those cuts are.
And to be fair, that was a week apart. Because we
Yeah.
were recording it on a Sunday, and then we kept trying to every day that week we kept trying to hook back up. But I was working extra shifts. You were busy because it was around the holidays. Like we were both just fucking swarmed with stuff we had to do. So it took us an entire week before we got back to it. So yeah, you listened to what we had already recorded and then explained it back to me because I couldn't remember all of it. So it was like it was trying to improv a week later, after already starting. Whereas with at least with Trains, Planes, and Batmobiles, like it was the next night. So it was a lot easier to be like, okay, yeah, we were here, let's do this.
Yeah, we just picked it right back up. That one was really just like I said, it was a time crunch. And then once we could relax, the ending made a lot of sense and we figured it out. But yeah, the Festivus one was, like I said, I think that would definitely qualify as a crash and burn, but I hit it and just put it out as a successful improv, like you said, because I felt like it was more like external factors. But one of these days we're not going to have a time crunch and we're going to be chugging along trying to tell a story, and we're both just going to say like, "Fuck, dude, I don't know what to do next," and that's when we're going to be going, "Yeah, all right, fine, pull the plug on it. Like, let's talk about the creative process and figure out like what went wrong." And I think that honestly, I think it'll be a fun episode when we do that. It'll be a fun. Way to look at the process and kind of examine what we do, like we've been for the last like 2 hours or so that we've been talking. But yeah, I still think it was a really fun season. Like I said, we did a total of 23 episodes. We did 5 straight originals plus Tales from the Cryptmas as like a sixth. We started 9 times with a movie property to do an improv. 2 TV shows right there at the end, if you count Seinfeld, and then again Tales from the Crypt. And then we did 2 video games, both of which were classic arcade games with Pac-Man and Joust. And again, like you said, while our Centipede episode may not have been the best one that we ever did, Pac-Man and Joust both turned out really well.
Yeah, I still like the Centipede one, but yeah, I think Pac-Man is probably my favorite of the video game ones. Joust too, I really like Joust as well, but Pac-Man is just something about the visuals that calls up.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pac-Man is all about the tension, the atmosphere, the visuals. Not the story is good, but that's really just a vehicle to like put characters in creepy situations. It's I've said before that I really like haunted house movies and ghost movies because I like that goosebump tension that you get just waiting for something creepy to happen. And like one of my favorite ones is The Innkeepers, which on its surface, like hardly anything actually happens in the plot. It's all vibes, and then Joust, to me, it was the world building, the story of the battle in the sky against, Python and his forces. It was fun. It's like action figure fun, but the world building was what was really exciting to me. And then I liked the Centipede one last season too, and where I thought that one did have a really good story. I thought it would fit right in with 80s action films, and I only mentioned that maybe it wasn't as successful because it was our least popular episode of season 2, if you can count it by downloads, which is really the only metric I have to go on. It's hard to tell who's downloading it on like Spotify or Apple and those places. Spotify has statistics, but it's hard to kind of compile it all together and get like a good understanding of what people are really listening to or streaming when they don't download something. But just based on downloads alone, like off of Podbean, our most downloaded episode of this season was, ironically enough, Prayer of the Solar Babies. Most downloaded. Yeah. And again, here's another piece of irony. The least downloaded was Bad Rubbish.
Wow.
And in fact, Bad Rubbish is the least downloaded episode of all time.
What the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't understand it either. I mean, shit, I thought that was a pretty good story.
Yeah, no, I liked it too.
Yeah, I mean, the most downloaded episode of all time is still Summer School 2, the David and Chainsaw Massacre from season 1. But again, we got caught in some kind of a bot algorithm or a glitch or something, because it's got 1,000 episode downloads more than anything else. But not counting that one, our all-time most downloaded episode is Big Trouble in Little Italy. At this point,
Wow.
It used to be the Vangabus of Death, but now Big Trouble has beaten it out. Yeah, in some cases more than 4 times other episodes. So anyway, I don't want to get into all the other facts and figures. I don't really think it's as important. As usual, we did horror more than anything else. We did horror exactly half of the time, so 50%, which is actually better than last season where it was like 60%. But
Right.
we had a couple actions, a couple of comedies, or actually about 5 comedies if you count like the teen comedy genre. But yeah, I think we did good on our desire to do less horror, but we still did a lot of horror because it's fun and that's what people like.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but it's an easy thing to improv, because when you don't know what to do, it's like, all right, kill that person.
Make it dark and creepy.
It's like shotgun to the face, done.
Done. Oh man. So anyway, Mike, that's it. We've talked on for way longer than I expected, but that's okay because, like I said at the beginning, we're obviously in love with ourselves, and we're going to go on and on and on. But you got to go to work, so we're up against the time crunch. And whatever. Let's wrap it up for the day. Wrap it up for the episode. Wrap it up for season 3. Wrap it up for 2024. We will be back sometime in January 2025. We have not decided exactly when we're going to record yet. Hell, that first episode might not even actually hit your podcatcher until early February. That's okay. We're taking our holiday break, and we have a bunch of cool ideas for episodes coming up. Don't forget to stop by the social media platforms and vote on the 10 episodes I mentioned earlier. I'll put the list up there so you don't have to remember. While you're there, don't forget to check out @RadPantheon on all the same social media platforms. Our super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, all sorts of creative people supporting each other to help spread the word about rad stuff. So if you like this show, there's a really good chance you're going to like one or maybe even all of our Rad Pantheon teammates. So definitely check out radpantheon.com. In the interest of time, I won't list them all off as I had originally planned. But again, radpantheon.com. Do yourself a favor, go check it out. Mike, you got anything going on at the end of the year?
No, I think we're pretty much set for the end of the year with both Boogeyman's Closet and Count Creepyhead. But we'll be coming back in 2025 with a bunch of new stuff. Boogeyman's Closet is going to have kind of a different format going forward. Like, we're still kind of finding our new footing based on scheduling. There's going to be a lot less voting on the picks, and a lot more me, Maurice, and Susie each picking a movie. We are still going to ask for feedback and ask for possible future episodes, but we're hitting, we're at the 5-year mark. We're like, what? There's a lot of movies that we want to cover that we haven't been able to get in because of the old voting format. So we're just going to take a couple of months where it's like, let's do this movie. Let's do this movie. Let's just get them out of the way and get through these. So yeah, the first half of 2025 is going to be a lot of cool shit.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait. Definitely can't wait. Don't forget to invite me to any cool movies that you think I would like. And I already have my birthday pick. I've had it picked since last year already. I'm still calling dibs on The Wraith. Not that it has to be in February, but whenever, I still want to do it. Put it on your calendar.
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah, and with that, I'll say once again, thanks to everyone for tuning into the Raise by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, visit us on those socials, drop us a line, leave a comment, leave a podcast rating. Let us know what you think we should improve next season, next year. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes. Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon Network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com.
Tennis, anyone?